One day, a kind-hearted girl named Arya thought about how the villagers needed labourers. She told her friends that they needed a man to help the village. But Miria, another girl, believed that in this country, villages were made up of only women, and they couldn't handle heavy work on their own. Miria knew that Arya despised men, but for the village's sake, she thought it was worth enduring. Kiri wondered where they could find these men, certain that no one would want to come to such a remote place. At that moment, Sui suggested that if they needed men so badly, maybe they should go find them themselves. However, Arya reminded them that they were deep in the mountains, and the search wouldn't be easy. Suddenly, the girls heard a loud noise outside. Without hesitation, Arya ran out of the house and looked up at the sky. Above, the girls saw something unimaginable, like a shooting star falling nearby. All the girls rushed outside to observe the strange object. Miria thought it might be a shooting star, while Arya believed it was a man flying. A few months ago, a fierce bear passed through the forest, terrifying everyone with its roar. The knights, clearly unprepared for battle, faced the bear. The bear wasted no time and immediately attacked the uninvited knights. The knights didn't understand why the bear had appeared in this forest. They tried to help their fallen comrades and get them out of danger, but their legs were too weak to run. Just as the bear was about to wipe out the knights, a young man appeared in the nick of time. The young man, named Rain Woolfield, swiftly took down the bear, standing tall as his figure emerged through the dust. Rain was glad to have dealt with the beast quickly, knowing the bear could summon other monsters with its roar. The knights, still in panic, began blaming Rain for arriving late and nearly costing them their lives. The commander ordered a retreat, leaving everything for Rain to handle. But Rain told them it was too late. The team was already surrounded. The bear had managed to summon many more monsters with its roar. The knights hid behind the trees, unsure of what to do, with no intention to fight. Their only hope now was Rain. Rain assured the knights not to worry, as he didn't care about the number of monsters. As the creatures roared again, Rain activated his accelerated thinking skill, waiting for something. The knights had resigned themselves to saying their final goodbyes, while Rain realized there were more monsters than usual today. He even speculated that their numbers could reach over 100. Rain then used his scouting skill to determine the exact number of creatures around him. Rain then activated trajectory sensing, eliminating all the monsters in the blink of an eye. He continued channeling his magical energy and cancelled accelerated thinking, just as the monster's claws were inches from his face. Finally, Rain swung his hand, and the bear's heads fell to the ground, sliced clean by the power of his wind blades. The monsters died one by one, powerless against him. In the end, only scattered remains of the creatures were left lying across the ground. The knights were stunned by how quickly Rain had wiped out so many monsters. To them, Rain seemed almost like a demon. But in the end, they didn't care, as the monsters were now dead and turning to stone. As one of the creatures turned to stone, a knight picked up a piece, his excitement clear. These stones, after all, could make someone rich for life. However, he was quickly reminded that he couldn't keep the stone for himself. Rain, meanwhile, scanned the surroundings to ensure no other threats remained. At that moment, the knights began collecting the stones left behind by the monsters. They were overjoyed, as with Rain on their side, hunting monsters felt like a mere stroll. Meanwhile, Rain had spent 15 years living with a family of demon-slaying sorcerers. In reality, Rain had been reincarnated, and this still amazed him. He had once been an ordinary office worker, with his last memory being drinking alone at home. Rain wasn't sure if he had died from alcohol or something else, as he had only been 33 years old. But now it didn't matter anymore. He had become a demon-slaying sorcerer. The demon-slaying nobles lived near dangerous places like the Demon Forest or the Monster Valley, responsible for hunting monsters to protect the kingdom. However, they were nobles in name only, as Rain had never been treated like a true noble. When Rain returned to the conference room, where everyone had been waiting, he was praised for his excellent work. The steward of the border army from the Holy Kingdom sat with his feet up on the table, complimenting Rain for killing so many monsters. He wanted to reward Rain, pointing to a bag of money on the table, saying it was his prize. But Rain quickly noticed the amount was insufficient, which made him angry. The steward saw no issue and reminded Rain that he only existed thanks to the king's mercy. He argued that Rain was already wealthy enough and shouldn't complain. Rain didn't argue, simply saying he would be in town if anyone needed him. Rain headed into town, thinking he needed to make more money. It had been a while since Rain last visited. More than a month had passed. When he accidentally passed by an old acquaintance's house, Rain wondered if this friend was doing well. Without much thought, Rain decided to visit. The friend, Zur, who Rain hadn't seen in a long time, was delighted to see him and immediately started asking about Rain's situation, since it had been a while since he returned home. Rain replied sadly that he was still doing everything on his own. This made Zur sigh, advising Rain to let him know if he needed work. Zur warned that if Rain kept going like this, he'd drive himself to an early grave. Zur knew that Rain was always battling monsters on missions, while the cowardly knights only stood by and watched. Rain asked Zur if there were any new books available, and Zur showed him some books on magic. Rain's eyes lit up, amazed by the rarity and brilliance of the books. Zur had kept these special volumes just for him, knowing Rain would love them. Rain was always drawn to new knowledge about magic. However, Rain constantly sought perfection, feeling there was still so much unexplored in ancient magic. He picked up the books and started reading them right there at Zur's place. Rain quickly realized that the magical language was strikingly similar to the programming languages from his previous world, allowing him to easily understand the content. He became completely absorbed in the books about star magic and creative magic. Meanwhile, Zur grew curious about Rain's research on curses, as he had heard that demon-slaying nobles rarely lived past the age of 40. This concerned him deeply. Zur's words made Rain pause for a moment, but Zur pressed him to say something. Eventually, Rain smiled and told Zur not to worry. However, Zur insisted that he couldn't help but worry. Rain was already 15, and he wouldn't realize how fast time would pass as he approached 40. Zur didn't understand why Rain seemed so unconcerned about the curse. Rain hesitated for a moment, as Zur was right. Demon-slaying sorcerers typically didn't live past 40 due to the curse. That was a fact. Then, Rain decided to reassure Zur by telling him that there had been progress in his research on the curse. However, he admitted that having more information from the ancestors of the sorcerers would give him greater peace of mind. Rain also noticed that Zur seemed downcast today, so he asked what was wrong. Zur confessed that he was about to leave the country. He told Rain that he had decided to move and live with his grandchildren, which meant closing the shop and getting rid of the books. Rain was glad he had bought all the books from Zur. Even though transporting them would take more than a day, Rain still believed that ancient magic held incredible value. Rain waved his hand over one of the books and used the storage spell, causing the book to vanish instantly. This was a type of star magic, allowing Rain to transport anything he touched to another dimension. If he ever forgot what he had stored, he could simply use a list to view everything placed in the storage. This magic had been incredibly useful, and Rain couldn't imagine what he would do without it. It was an ancient spell used by ancestors from a lost civilization, so Rain thought it best not to use it openly. With that in mind, he decided to finish transferring all the books quickly. Once free to leave the city, Rain reflected that even though he had mastered many ancient spells, he still couldn't solve the curse hanging over him. If there was no other way, Rain would die at the age of 40, something he desperately wanted to avoid. He constantly searched for a way to escape that grim fate. Suddenly, Rain remembered he needed to harvest vegetables from his garden. As he approached his house, the sight before him left him horrified. A carriage was parked right in the middle of his vegetable garden, and the horses were feasting on the crops from his greenhouse. Furious, Rain rushed over to the horses, ordering them to stop eating, knowing full well the effort he had put into growing those vegetables. But, of course, the horses couldn't care less. At that moment, someone rudely stabbed a sword into the ground right in front of Rain. His anger flared, but the knight leaning on the sword casually announced that Count Runnenford was present and no outsiders were allowed in. Rain, infuriated, declared that this was his home and their horses had eaten his entire crop, so they would have to compensate for the damage. However, the knight merely stated that he was accompanying the Count. Just then, the uninvited Count Runnenford stepped out of Rain's house with a smile on his face. The Count called Rain "my son" and told him their conversation would have to wait, as Rain had been summoned by the king and needed to prepare quickly. Rain was stunned at being called son, which meant that this man was his father, even though it was the first time he had ever seen him. Even so, Rain couldn't understand why his father had come looking for him now. The Count noticed Rain's shock but suggested they discuss it later, as Rain's fiancée, someone he had never heard of, was waiting for him in the capital. That fiancée was none other than the country's princess, Mistress Emilia. Hearing this, Rain was again astonished, but he still accompanied his father to the capital. 2 months later, Rain was supposedly ready to win the princess's heart. The Count urged him to be more serious and focused, but Rain was clearly nervous. The Count explained that since demon-slaying sorcerers didn't live long, it had been agreed that instead of continuing to fight monsters, Rain would marry the princess. Rain had heard of this from his mother, but the Count added that if Rain failed, another groom would be chosen from families with sons Rain's age. This revelation left Rain confused. Seeing the look on his face, the Count realized Rain had known nothing about this. Worried, the Count declared that if Rain could marry the princess, they would become part of the royal family, and that responsibility rested entirely on his shoulders. Finally, the Count asked Rain if he was listening. Rain smiled and said that he was. The Count, excited at the thought of becoming more than just a Count, told Rain to thank his mother for bringing him into this world. At last, the Count said he trusted Rain to succeed, but those words only made Rain feel even more disheartened. Rain knew his father didn't truly believe in him. He was simply using Rain for his own ambitions. When Rain's mother was slowly dying from the curse, his father didn't act like a real father. The only reason he remembered Rain was because the Count craved royal power. That's why he was so eager to persuade Rain to marry the princess. Rain realized his life had been peaceful until his father dragged him into these power games. At first, Rain thought the princess would be unattractive, but when he saw her, his eyes lit up. The princess looked at him, and for the first time, Rain found her incredibly cute and truly beautiful. But as the ceremony was about to begin, the princess suddenly apologized to Rain, looking regretful. He took her hand, but didn't understand why she was sorry. Finally, the ceremony was announced, and the king began his speech. Suddenly, the grand doors of the hall flew open, and a young man entered, kneeling before the king. He apologized first, then asked the king to reconsider his decision. The king, seated on his throne and stroking his long beard, asked the young man who he was. The young man confidently replied that his name was Checklists, eldest son of Duke Grand Height. The whole situation seemed suspicious to Rain. What was strangest of all was that no one said a word. Even though this boy was a duke's son, interrupting a royal engagement was completely unacceptable. Yet Rain didn't want to confront the issue himself. He knew it wasn't the right move. He also noticed that all the guests had strange expressions. At that moment, Checklists told the king that the princess had the right to marry for love. Suddenly, the princess let go of Rain's hand and stepped back. That was the moment Rain realized everything. It had all been planned long ago, and everyone present, except for Rain and the Count, knew what was about to happen. At this point, the king listened to Checklists and understood his point. He turned to ask Count Runnenford for his opinion on the matter. The Count was startled when the king addressed him. With trembling hands, the Count stated that the marriage between demon-slaying sorcerers was a tradition from the time of the first kings, a sacred ritual that should not be broken. After hearing the Count, the king turned to ask for Rain's opinion. Rain knelt before the king and said that the noble families who fought demons were long gone. In fact, 5 years ago, Rain had taken on that responsibility himself. He thought it would be best to break the engagement now, as larger issues might arise from this marriage in the future. The king, realizing that Rain was only 15, asked if he had been fighting demons since he was 10 years old. Rain confirmed that it was true, and for him it was normal. However, the guests began whispering among themselves, believing Rain was speaking nonsense. Even elite soldiers didn't always survive the demon forest, so they doubted that a boy like Rain could kill demons. Sensing the guests' skepticism, the king asked Rain to explain how he dealt with the demons. Although Rain didn't understand why others were so interested in this, he decided to share and demonstrate. Rain explained that he used a spell called Wind Blades. As soon as he said this, the guests began to laugh. They laughed loudly and pointed at Rain. Even the king chuckled when he heard about the spell. Wind Blades was considered a weak spell, insufficient to kill demons, and nearly everyone possessed it. But Rain couldn't understand why people mocked it. He believed that with proper development, Wind Blades could become much stronger and use less mana. At that moment, the king announced his decision. The engagement would be immediately cancelled. These words shocked Rain. However, the king explained that he had long wanted to abolish this tradition, which had been established by the first king. He thought relying on basic magic like wind blades to fight demons wasn't even funny as a joke. The Count, realizing how dire the situation had become, tried to say something but was too nervous to speak. The knights approached and asked him to leave the ceremony. In the end, the demon-slaying nobles were dismissed, and both the Count and Rain were thrown out of the event. The Count blamed everything on Rain and disowned him, declaring that he would abandon Rain completely. From that point on, Rain became a commoner, with the threat from his father that he would never be allowed to see him again. Now, no matter what Rain said, no one cared. From this lesson, Rain realized one thing: this world was unforgiving. He lay carelessly on the grass, suddenly aware that he had become unemployed. Rain had no idea how he would survive in the future, knowing he couldn't feed himself with just a small garden. There were no jobs available in other nations either, and who would hire a homeless person? These unpleasant thoughts swirled in Rain's mind. Rain then considered becoming an adventurer, given his experience hunting demons. However, he quickly realized that after what had happened, no one would accept him. Suddenly, a new idea struck him. He stood up and decided to leave the country. He had thought about this before, but he couldn't act on it because demon-slaying nobles were forbidden from leaving the kingdom. But now Rain could do whatever he wanted. He began formulating a plan. Walking would be too slow, so Rain decided to try flying by compressing air beneath his feet, creating thrust like a rocket. After some preparation, Rain was ready, with enough supplies to last him a few days. He protected his body with enhancement magic and reduced air resistance using wind defense spells. Now Rain was fully confident that everything would be fine. Without hesitation, he began executing his plan. In an instant, Rain shot up into the sky like a bullet, even touching the edge of space for a few brief moments. He considered this a major success, having figured out a way to move quickly. He could go anywhere he wanted with such a jump. The only problem was that he had no idea where to go next. However, as rain started falling, he realized he hadn't thought about how to land. He hovered in mid-air, cursing himself for not considering the fact that he could fall from such a height. But the more urgent issue was finding a safe place to land. He soared over populated areas and knew he couldn't land there. Rain quickly realized he needed to find a forest or mountain to safely make his landing. Rain tried to use wind magic to change his direction, but quickly realized he was falling too fast to control it. In this situation, Rain knew that main characters usually summon all their willpower to act, but he had no desire to die here. Eventually, he crash-landed in a forest, the same forest that Arya and her friends had spotted when they saw him flying overhead. The group of girls felt the need to investigate what had fallen. Arya wanted to go alone, but the others wouldn't let her, saying it was too dangerous. Finally, one of the girls, who had climbed a tree, spotted what they were looking for. Arya was excited by the news and asked where they should go next. The answer was clear. They had to head into the demon forest where Rain had landed. As the girls entered the forest and saw the widespread destruction, they wondered if it was safe to proceed. After all, if something had caused that much damage, the monsters could go berserk. Arya agreed and suggested they return to the village to prepare a defense plan. But suddenly Sui called out to Arya, pointing ahead. Arya walked over, asking what was wrong, and Sui replied that someone was lying over there. At that moment, Rain woke up, realizing he was still alive. He was lucky to have used body enhancement magic, or else he would likely be dead. However, his head was spinning and he couldn't get up. Could he have run out of mana? Just then, Arya approached and asked if he was okay. The other girls gathered around, staring at him curiously. Kiri asked if he was still alive, and Lin, more direct, asked Rain if he had survived, because anyone who dozed off in the demon forest was as good as dead. Hearing the words demon forest, Rain snapped to attention. He sat up, alarmed, and asked where he was. The answer came quickly. He was in the kingdom of Astra. Rain followed up with another question. Who are you? Kiri explained that they were from a nearby village. Rain had never heard of the kingdom of Astra. At that moment, Lin tried to ask Rain where he came from, but he was too deep in thought, feeling increasingly threatened. He warned the girls that they needed to run immediately, as monsters would soon appear, but it was already too late to escape. A demon wolf appeared on the hill. Arya panicked, unable to understand how the monster had arrived so quickly. Miria screamed that they needed to leave immediately, as a whole pack of demon wolves would soon follow. Rain quickly used his scouting spell and realized they were surrounded by too many monsters. He understood that with his current mana, he could only use wind blades once, and then he'd have no strength left to fight. At this point, Arya, furious, demanded to know what Rain was doing and told him he needed to run. But Rain firmly stated that he would clear a path so they could escape. Arya disagreed, believing that Rain couldn't possibly fight off the monsters alone. However, Rain had no intention of debating. He simply told everyone to lie down if they didn't want to die. Although the girls started asking many questions, when Rain gave the command, they obediently lay down without further protest. Finally, Rain began chanting wind blades, and in an instant, all the demon wolves surrounding them were defeated. Rain, utterly exhausted, collapsed, forcing the girls to drag him back to the village. Kiri, pulling him along, was full of admiration for Rain, amazed that he had single-handedly taken down so many demon wolves. Arya, who was dragging him by the other leg, added that he had passed out immediately after defeating the monsters. However, Kiri couldn't help but mention that Arya's wish had come true. After all, she had seen a shooting star and wished for a man to help them, and now they were dragging one back to the village. Arya, both embarrassed and angry, protested that it wasn't like that at all. She argued that they needed Rain for the village's sake and that she only saw him as a worker. But the other girls thought Arya was doing great since she had trained so hard. Kiri teased her, suggesting she should train her brain as much as her muscles, which made Arya snap and tell Kiri to be quiet. Miria added that having a strong guy like Rain in the village would be good, but the real question was whether Rain would agree. As they continued dragging him, Kiri and Miria whispered to each other. Arya noticed and shot them a disapproving look. Kiri reminded Arya that first impressions were important, making Arya stammer that she already knew that. Finally, Rain woke up. His first question was, "Where am I?" before realizing his head hurt and reaching up to touch a cold compress. Just then, Miria, Kiri, and Arya entered the room, each carrying a plate of food. The girls were overjoyed to see that Rain had woken up, as they had been worried. Rain simply apologized for causing trouble. However, Arya couldn't help but express her frustration about how difficult it had been to drag him back to the village. Kiri and Miria quickly nudged Arya's elbow to stop her from complaining. While Rain sat on the bed, confused, the girls whispered to each other, trying to sort things out. Finally, Miria reminded Arya to lower her voice. At that moment, Sui and Lin entered the room as well, both thrilled to see Rain awake. Lin thanked Rain for saving them and asked if he was a sorcerer. Rain awkwardly replied, "Almost." Sui, in admiration, said it was the first time she had seen such powerful magic. Finally, the girls suggested that Rain could stay with them as long as he wanted. Rain thanked them for their kindness and admitted that he had nowhere else to go. Hearing this, the girls were even more excited and invited him to stay in their village, where there were no men at all. Rain found it strange that there were no men in the village, but the girls quickly changed the subject. Arya handed him a plate of food, telling him he should eat to recover. Right after that, all the girls hurried out of the room, shutting the door firmly behind them. Lin and Sui weren't happy with the older girls' actions, since they still wanted to chat with Rain. Meanwhile, Kiri and Miria were thrilled about what Rain had said, that he had no place to go. The girls thought he was a perfect find, and decided they couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Finally, they had a new source of manpower for the village. Miria was even determined to make sure Rain stayed no matter what. Arya, on the other hand, was already imagining Rain not only protecting the village from monsters, but also working the fields. Miria thought he could help fix the houses. Kiri was happy because they could finally repair the broken fence. Lin, however, listened to her sisters with a mix of confusion and judgment. But in the end, the girls all agreed that they wouldn't let Rain escape. Meanwhile, Rain calmly ate the food they had given him in the room. The next morning, the girls started preparing breakfast, carefully carrying the food without spilling it. By then, Rain had gotten out of bed and was getting ready for the day. He felt much better after resting and could move normally again. Looking at the clothes rack, he noticed his clothes had been washed by the girls, which made him happy, and he decided to thank them sincerely. Walking down the hallway in his clean clothes, Rain realized this was the first time he had stepped outside his room since being brought here. He wondered where the girls were at the moment. As he reflected on everything that had happened, he couldn't believe how quickly things had unfolded. Finally, when Rain found the girls, they were having breakfast. Arya was the first to ask if he was feeling better, while Miria wished him a good morning. Meanwhile, Kiri reminded Lin not to chew so loudly. Kiri then invited Rain to sit at the table and make himself at home. Rain didn't refuse and sat next to her. Lin, with her mouth full, thanked Rain for saving her the day before. This made Kiri furious, and she lightly smacked Lin on the head, telling her to finish chewing before speaking. Lin quickly swallowed her food, looking upset and teary-eyed, asking why Kiri had done that. Kiri, annoyed, responded that Lin shouldn't talk with her mouth full. She added that Lin wouldn't get any more rice today, which made Lin indignant. Rain watched the girls bicker and smiled gently, realizing how lively this place was. Miria, catching Rain's smile, told him it was all thanks to him. She explained that before, they never imagined someone would fall from the sky, which was why they decided to investigate. But then, they were attacked by the wolves, and Rain had saved them all. However, Rain felt that he should be the one thanking the girls for bringing him back to the village and treating his injuries. At that moment, Sui sat quietly, looking sad over her plate of food. Miria noticed and asked if she wanted more, and without waiting for a reply, she decided to bring Sui another helping. Meanwhile, Arya placed her hand on the table, her face serious, and told Rain that they needed to talk after breakfast. She declared that she would take Rain on a tour of the village once he finished eating. Arya added that they had a few things to take care of while walking around. Miria and Kiri smiled at this, their smiles clearly forced as they tried to appear pleasant. Rain noticed the strange behavior of the girls and asked if something was wrong, but both Kiri and Miria replied in unison, "Nothing." Afterward, Rain and Arya took a walk around the village. Rain thought the village wasn't bad, but Arya explained that because it was so close to the demon forest, most of the villagers had already evacuated to other villages, and with them, all the men had left as well. Arya added that this was why they were so happy to have a guy like Rain around. Eventually, Arya led Rain to an empty plot of land. She declared that this land now belonged to him, and he would have to share part of the harvest with the girls as payment. She told him he would need to work hard on this land. Rain looked at the barren field, utterly confused, not understanding what was happening. But Arya was confident she had explained everything clearly and was ready to leave. However, Rain grabbed her shoulder and asked her to wait. Arya felt a surge of anger because he touched her so suddenly, startling her, but Rain only asked what he was supposed to do. Not wanting to answer, Arya quickly walked away, saying she had other things to take care of. Rain stood there, confused, still unsure of what he was supposed to do. He decided to check his inventory and felt relieved to see he had all the necessary tools ready. Then, he began to wonder what his next step should be. Rain figured the first task was to level the land and then gather wood. With his tools in hand, he started his work. Meanwhile, Kiri and Arya sat inside a small house, talking. Kiri was frustrated that Arya had left Rain alone, unable to understand what Arya was thinking. Arya believed Rain should work to repay the food and shelter they had given him. However, Kiri was certain that Rain wouldn't be able to handle the task easily on his own, and it would likely take a long time. Arya shouted that she understood that, but still wanted the land to be used for farming. Kiri decided to deal with that later, and reminded Arya that they should be as friendly as possible to convince Rain to stay in the village. Kiri grabbed Arya's face and stressed that she shouldn't be too strict from the start, and instead should show Rain maximum kindness. She tried to explain that this was their only chance, and they couldn't afford to let Rain leave under any circumstances. Finally, Arya couldn't take it anymore, and with a tearful voice cried out, asking Kiri what she was supposed to do since Kiri knew she was afraid of men. Kiri gently asked Arya not to cry. Arya felt she had done nothing wrong. After all, she had just shown Rain the village, and pointed out where he could live. Kiri apologized for being so pushy, and admitted that she had overreacted a bit. At that moment, Miria appeared, overhearing that Rain was working alone, and she was furious about it. Miria thought assigning such a task to Rain was unacceptable, fearing he might run away. This was when Arya realized Miria was right and decided to check on Rain. Meanwhile, Rain was nearly done with his work, just needing to tidy up a bit more. He planned to deal with the wood he had chopped. Suddenly, Arya appeared with an angry expression and shouted, "What is this?" She stared at the pile of wood in disbelief, asking if it had come from the demon forest. Rain calmly explained that he leveled the land and had to cut down the extra trees, thinking they weren't useful to the girls. However, Arya was more concerned with what Rain had been thinking, cutting down so many trees. Rain didn't understand why Arya was upset, since she had told him to make the land livable. Arya, still angry, argued that Rain had gone too far, She was confused because she knew that causing this much damage to the demon forest would surely provoke an attack by the monsters. She was convinced they'd face a horde of monsters, so she decided to return to the village and warn everyone about the impending attack. Rain urged Arya not to worry so much, but Arya, full of frustration, snapped that he couldn't possibly understand how serious the situation was and told him to stop talking nonsense. Finally, after a deep sigh, Arya ordered Rain to stay behind and prepare for defense while she gathered the villagers. As Arya ran off, Rain began to wonder what he should do next. He realized the biggest issue was not knowing exactly where the monsters would attack from. He then considered building a wall around the village, but quickly realized he didn't have the strength to fend off an entire monster attack by himself. Suddenly, Rain had a brilliant idea. Meanwhile, Arya rushed back to the village and informed everyone that Rain had cut down trees from the demon forest. Everyone was shocked, and Arya apologized, taking responsibility. However, Lin slammed her hand on the table and declared that it wasn't Arya's fault. But she didn't know what they should do now. Sui noticed Lin's anxiety and approached her to offer comfort. At this moment, Miria thought that while Rain was strong, if he failed, the entire village would be destroyed. The girls didn't know how to handle the situation. Arya said they had no other choice, and suggested they go to Rain and work together to protect the village from the monsters. That was exactly what the girls decided to do. They headed to where Rain was waiting for them. Arya felt that the monsters were drawing closer, while Miria worried about how many there would be. Suddenly, Lin screamed and pointed in a direction. She was pointing at a massive hole that had appeared right in front of them. Arya was stunned by the sight of the hole, as it had never been there before. She guessed that it had been created by a demon emerging from the forest. At that moment, the roars of the monsters echoed, and the girls realized that Rain had already begun fighting, so they rushed to help him. After a while, the girls found Rain standing on a cliff's edge. They were shocked to see him there. Rain heard them and turned around, warning the girls to be careful because the situation was dangerous. On the other side of the cliff, a horde of monsters had gathered. Kiri started to panic, unsure of what to do when faced with an entire army of monsters. Lin, though standing beside Kiri and equally terrified, tried to calm her, saying they shouldn't worry. Rain asked the girls to wait a moment and told them he was almost finished. In his hands was a bow, but there were no arrows, which left the girls confused. However, Rain knew that when he drew the bowstring, wind arrows, while weak at long range, became much stronger when enemies were closer. This created a range of damage levels from minor to devastating. At that moment, Rain began using his magic. He infused a spell called Wind Blades into the arrow. Arya watched, confused, not understanding what was happening. A powerful gust of wind gathered around Rain, and finally the arrow materialized on the bow. Without hesitation, Rain aimed directly at the monsters and fired the arrow with incredible speed and force. Meanwhile, the demon wolves continued charging toward Rain, unaware and fearless. But as soon as the arrow pierced through the first wolf, Rain shouted, "Arrow of wind!" Immediately, powerful wind blades erupted. The unbelievable happened. The single arrow flew from one wolf to the next, cutting down each one in its path. The girls were both astonished and thrilled by the sight, but suddenly a magic stone hit Lin on the head. The girls quickly realized these were magic stones dropping from the defeated demons. They understood that with this many stones, they could live comfortably for years. At that moment, everyone realized that Rain had truly taken down the entire pack of demons on his own. Rain looked at his bow and realized he had overexerted himself. He hadn't even needed the bow to do the job. Just then, Arya ran up to Rain, who stood on the edge of the pit, and mentioned that they had seen a similar hole on their way there. Arya suspected the monsters might still be nearby, but Rain explained that he had created the holes himself using his earth manipulation skills. He said they would still need wood, and it would be difficult to constantly fend off monster attacks, which is why he had dug a moat around the village. Rain explained that this method would ensure they no longer had to worry about where the monsters might attack from. Arya then asked what would happen if the monsters simply jumped over the moat. Rain explained that he had made a narrow section in the moat where the monsters could jump across, so they only needed to defend that single spot to protect the village. Miria, standing there with an armful of magic stones, was overjoyed that the problem had been solved. She thought the moat would be a huge help and started thanking Rain for saving them once again. Meanwhile, Lin curiously looked down into the moat, trying to gauge its depth, while Sui stood next to her, reminding her to be careful. Miria then noticed the pile of wood Rain had chopped and was even more impressed. Rain explained that he had prepared extra wood because many of the village houses needed repairs. Miria didn't think Rain had cut too much wood. In fact, it was exactly what they needed. At that moment, someone suddenly jumped onto Rain from behind. It was Lin, unable to contain her excitement, hugging him tightly. Rain, caught off guard, asked why Lin had done that. Lin just looked at him and said, "You're really strong." Rain chuckled and promised to keep doing his best. Still happily clinging to his back, Lin declared that she wanted to work alongside him. While Lin held on tightly, Arya stood nearby, deep in thought. She tried to process everything Rain had done and realized that he could achieve all of this through his control over the land. But she began to wonder just how much power it would take to do something like that. Arya felt that Rain was undoubtedly the savior of their village. Meanwhile, Rain was asking Lin to get off his back, but she stubbornly refused. Sui, standing nearby, also wanted Rain to carry her. When Lin finally agreed to climb down, Rain noticed Arya's thoughtful expression and walked over to ask if something was wrong. Arya replied with a bit of irritation, saying that Rain had caused a mess here. However, Lin disagreed and stood up for him, insisting that he was only trying to save them. But Rain thought it was all his fault. Arya, still slightly annoyed, said she was glad Rain understood that. She declared that she'd forgive him this time, but if he did something similar again, she wouldn't be so lenient. Rain didn't want to argue with anyone, so he simply promised to be more careful from now on. Meanwhile, the others teased Arya for being too strict, making her smile. She decided to drop the subject and invited Rain back to the village. At that moment, Rain realized he'd be staying in this village for a while. As they stood near the cliff, Arya asked Rain what they should do with the magic stones left behind by the monsters. If they left them there, other monsters might eat them. Rain decided to collect the stones and bring them back to the village. Miria seemed more excited than the others at the thought of gathering the magic stones. But then Lin asked an important question. How do we get to the other side? There was no bridge, but this was no problem for Rain. He used his earth manipulation skill, making the ground come together to form a temporary bridge. The girls were astonished to see Rain create a bridge in the blink of an eye. Lin was the most excited and realized that magic truly was a miracle. She ran after Rain and asked him to teach her magic. However, Rain refused, saying it was too early for her to start learning. Rain understood that not everyone could master magic, which is why there were strict selection processes before training began. He figured this country would be no exception. Still, Lin was persistent. With teary eyes, she begged Rain to teach her magic, but he remained firm in his refusal. Even in the evening, when everyone gathered for dinner, Lin kept asking Rain to teach her magic, promising she would do anything he wanted. However, Rain explained that no matter how much she begged, he wouldn't teach her magic, especially because there was a chance she might not succeed. But Lin promised she would try her best. At that moment, Arya and Kiri were serving soup into the bowls. Meanwhile, Lin refused to let Rain eat. She climbed onto his lap and sat there. Though Rain asked her to get down, Lin stayed put, pleading with him to teach her magic. Rain was surprised that Lin could sit on his lap so easily, even though she was a girl. But Lin didn't find it embarrassing at all. To her, Rain was like an older brother. Finally, Kiri couldn't take it anymore and stepped in. She grabbed Lin's face and politely asked her to let Rain eat in peace. At last, Lin reluctantly got off Rain's lap. Kiri apologized to Rain, adding that now he could enjoy his dinner in peace. She then sent Lin to her room, despite Lin's protests that she hadn't eaten yet. Kiri didn't care, pointing out that Lin had been sitting at the table without touching her food. Lin shouted that it wasn't fair. After a while, all the plates were empty. Rain helped Kiri clean up, and she apologized again, thanking him for the help. But for Rain, it wasn't a big deal. He was more concerned about Lin, who hadn't eaten anything. However, Kiri thought Lin needed to reflect on her behavior. While Rain remained calm, Kiri apologized once more for Lin bothering him all day. Rain smiled and reassured her that it wasn't a big deal, but Kiri felt she should pay more attention to Lin. Suddenly, Rain thought about how strangely Lin spoke for a child. Her tone sounded more like a man's than a young girl's. Kiri decided to share a story with Rain. She began by saying that Lin once had an older brother, and they were always together. Lin loved him dearly. Rain asked what had happened, and Kiri explained that Lin's brother had died in a demon attack. That's when Rain realized he had brought up a sensitive topic and felt awkward. He apologized for bringing up something sad, but Kiri reassured him that it was okay and told him not to worry. However, Kiri acknowledged that Lin was still troubled by it and believed that if she had known magic, she might have saved her brother. In the end, Kiri promised to talk to Lin and told Rain not to dwell on it. That was when Rain understood that Lin wanted to learn magic to protect those she loved and to defend her home. With that thought, Rain made a decision. Once everyone was asleep, he prepared everything he needed, determined to make it happen. The next morning, Rain gathered everyone into a room. He announced that he would start teaching the girls magic from that day forward. Naturally, Lin was the most excited. Arya, on the other hand, was clearly not pleased, and Rain noticed, asking why she had such a look on her face. She replied irritably, saying he was probably planning something strange again. But Rain tried to explain that he wasn't thinking of anything unusual. He admitted that he didn't know how magic was typically taught in this country. Miria explained that older sorcerers usually just trained their students, and that was it. Miria also added that when sorcerers took in girls with no talent for magic as students, they often had other goals in mind. In some cases, they even wanted to adopt those girls. But those who mastered magic were often sent to wealthy merchants or nobles and became courtesans. Rain was shocked by these stories and didn't understand why the country was like this. Regardless, he wanted to start the lesson immediately. He handed out cards to the girls and asked them to use them. The girls were puzzled about what the cards were. Rain explained that they were magic quantifiers. Lin was curious about how to use the magic quantifiers, while Kiri was worried about how expensive they must be. However, Rain didn't think they were too costly. Suddenly, Miria said that when she channeled a bit of magic into the card, some words appeared. Rain was slightly surprised, because he hadn't expected Miria to know how to do that. This was exactly what he planned to teach them today. Miria explained that she had used a little magic before. Rain explained that the magic quantifier would reveal which element the user had a natural affinity for. He believed that everyone had a talent for a specific element, and the quantifier would show which one suited each person. Lin, seeing Miria's affinity for light magic, was eager to find out her own element. However, when she simply waved the card, nothing happened. Rain chuckled and explained that magic couldn't be used that way. First, she had to learn how to sense magical energy. Lin was disappointed that she couldn't do it right away. She then wondered how the quantifier related to magic. Rain liked the question and explained that magic was activated by using the mana within one's body to cast spells. Therefore, the most important step was learning to sense magical energy. Even though Rain explained thoroughly, Lin still didn't fully understand. Rain continued, saying he had prepared the magic quantifiers to help them better feel their mana. Rain explained that in learning magic, this was the most crucial step. It turned out that the magic quantifiers had the ability to absorb magical energy, and with them, the girls' training would progress much faster. Lin was eager to learn, but Rain gently patted her head, telling her there was no need to rush. She would learn everything in time. The key was not to worry too much. As Rain explained to everyone, one of the girls remarked that he now looked a lot like a teacher, which left Rain a bit flustered. At that moment, Kiri started crying because she couldn't get anything to work and thought her magic quantifier was broken. Arya had her own magic quantifier, but for some reason she seemed scared and hesitant to use it. After a few hours, Sui and Lin succeeded. Lin had an affinity for water magic, while Sui had earth magic. Kiri, however, was still struggling with her quantifier and feeling anxious. That's when Rain decided to continue the lesson. Wanting to show the girls some basic spells, he asked them to watch closely as he began demonstrating water creation spells for Sui and Lin. The girls were amazed, but one time wasn't enough for them. They asked Rain to do it again. Rain hadn't expected them to be so fascinated, so he decided to have Sui repeat the spell and handed her a cup. However, the lesson was interrupted when Arya suggested they start with body enhancement training. Hearing this, Rain asked Arya if she knew anything about magic, and she replied that she knew quite a bit, but thought it was best to begin with body enhancement training. Rain agreed that Arya's suggestion made sense, but he believed it was better to start with elemental magic first. Without reaching a certain level of skill in magic, body enhancement wouldn't be effective. However, Arya argued that anyone could use this magic, while Rain insisted that wasn't entirely true. Rain explained that it was rare to use magic effectively without an affinity for that element. With her head lowered, Arya asked if that meant that even if she had magical power, she wouldn't be able to use body enhancement properly. Rain clarified that while it could be used, it wouldn't develop well without an affinity for a specific element. Therefore, it was better to focus on each person's natural element. Hearing this, Arya went quiet and began to walk away. Rain asked if something was wrong, but she simply replied that she needed some fresh air. Rain watched Arya leave, guessing she might not like his teaching method. He decided he should apologize and told Sui and Lin to wait for him a moment. But just then, Kiri whispered to Rain, saying he hadn't done anything wrong. It was just that Arya was truly grateful he had decided to teach them magic. Kiri asked Rain to keep going and encouraged him to keep training with Lin and Sui. Rain followed her advice, but Lin was still struggling. No matter how hard she tried, the water wouldn't move at all. Rain told her not to rush and turned to Sui, realizing she hadn't made much progress either. Sui was determined to do her best if Lin succeeded, but Rain explained that it wasn't necessary to compare herself to Lin. Just then, Kiri and Arya returned to the room. Arya approached Rain and politely asked him to teach her magic as well. Lin playfully teased that Arya wouldn't be able to catch up with them, but Arya firmly declared that they would soon see who needed to catch up. In that situation, Rain decided to give it another try. That evening, the girls began preparing dinner. Lin had practiced all day but still couldn't succeed, leaving her very frustrated. Arya also hadn't succeeded, and started to think she had no magical talent at all. However, Rain assured her that wasn't true. He believed Arya had great potential in other elements and was impressed by her eagerness to learn void magic. He was confident that one day she would master body enhancement magic. These words lifted Arya's spirits a little. Rain realized Arya had an affinity for fire magic and decided to train her in how to start a fire. Arya then wondered if this magic would even be useful. Kiri and Miria quickly jumped in, arguing that using fire magic would make things much easier since starting a fire manually was such a hassle. In the end, Rain praised everyone, including Lin and Sui. Lin was thrilled that they were getting closer to success, while Sui thought it was all thanks to Rain's lessons and that they wouldn't have been able to do it without his help. Kiri agreed with Sui, saying that Rain was an excellent teacher. She admitted that she couldn't understand anything at first, but thanks to Rain's clear explanations, it made sense now. However, Rain felt like he hadn't done anything special. Arya also agreed with Kiri. She mentioned that she had practiced with her previous teacher but never succeeded. She had once thought she had an affinity for void magic, but now she knew that wasn't the case. Kiri reminded Arya that at first she didn't even want to listen to Rain. Arya apologized and admitted that now she understood everything better and was eager to learn from him. Rain was just happy that he could teach the girls something useful. Lin insisted that she wouldn't fall behind the others and decided to use earth manipulation magic right on the kitchen table. Despite Rain's efforts to stop her, it was too late. With her strength, Lin filled the entire kitchen with dirt. Rain explained that this happened because she poured too much mana into the spell, which wasn't the right thing to do. Lin gave a sheepish smile and apologized to everyone, but it was too late. Kiri was already on her. Kiri grabbed Lin's face, frustrated, and asked what they were supposed to do with her now that the room was covered in dirt. Lin kept apologizing guiltily, while Arya was only worried about her clothes getting dirty. Lin even promised that it wouldn't happen again once she got stronger. Miria laughed, realizing they had never had such a fun dinner before. At that moment, Sui approached Miria, who started wiping her face with a handkerchief. Without thinking too much, Miria suggested that the girls take a bath. Kiri wasn't sure if Miria was serious, as the lake was far away. Rain then asked if they had a bathtub, to which they replied that of course they didn't. Miria argued that bathtubs were only for nobles and keeping water warm required magical tools which were expensive. Rain thought about this and soon suggested that he could make a bath for them himself. Hearing this, the girls became incredibly excited. They started asking Rain when he could finish the bath, and Rain replied that since he'd use magic, it wouldn't take long. However, he added that they would need a spacious area to set it up. Miria told Rain that there was a storage shed near the house, and he could use it freely. The girls were so excited about getting a bath that they started talking about clothes, baskets, towels, and soap. Without hesitation, they ran out of the house to gather everything they needed. Rain didn't know how to feel about this, as the girls seemed to be making all the decisions for him quite naturally. When they led Rain to the room where they wanted the bath, he was stunned by the large space. Cautiously, he asked if they were sure they wanted such a huge bath, and Miria replied, "The bigger, the better." Rain was still amazed since this was the largest storage shed in the village. But Miria reasoned that they weren't using it for anything else. Arya had always dreamed of having a bath next to the house, and Miria was thrilled that they'd finally have one. Kiri, wanting to swim, asked Rain to make the bath deep. Arya requested a shower and tiled floors to make it look stylish. Lin asked Rain to make a lion statue with hot water flowing from its mouth, while Sui wanted a place for a water slide. The girls were eagerly expecting Rain to do a great job with all their requests. Although Rain promised he'd try his best to fulfill everything, he still wasn't sure how to make it all happen. But when he saw the eager faces of the girls, Rain realized there was no backing out. He couldn't let them down. First, Rain decided to tackle the land issue. He realized that such a large bath would need a lot of land, so he used earth magic to expand the area. Lin watched in amazement at Rain's earth manipulation skills. Rain simply told her she'd be able to do the same soon and continued his work. With earth manipulation, Rain began shaping the bath. He then wondered where exactly to place it and pointed to a spot, asking the girls if it was okay. They agreed, and Rain continued using earth magic to finally mold the bath into shape. After a few moments, the bathtub had taken shape, and Sui and Lin were overjoyed. Finally, the bath was ready. Kiri and Arya asked Rain if he was done, looking at the progress. Rain responded that it wasn't finished yet, and that he would use a spell called Earth Forging to complete it. After using the spell, Rain finished building the bathtub, and even added the tiles the girls had requested. Lin was thrilled, realizing that even something like this could be created with magic. The bath Arya wanted looked beautiful, but she was still doubtful about its strength. She knocked on it with her fist to test it. The girls climbed inside and realized that the bathtub was incredibly sturdy, like it was made of porcelain. Arya couldn't believe Rain had made it. Rain assured them that it was all done with basic magic. Next, he decided to fill the tub with water, demonstrating the water creation spell that the girls had learned. Rain created a large amount of water over the bath and let it flow inside. The girls were amazed to see that even this could be done with magic. Finally, Rain touched the water and used a heating spell. The girls quickly tested the water and were surprised by how warm it was. They wondered if magic had any limits. Meanwhile, Rain decided to continue working outside, letting the girls enjoy the bath. As he left, the girls eagerly undressed and got into the tub. They couldn't believe they now had their own hot bath. Suddenly, Lin noticed the lion statue she had requested, though it resembled a flower more than a lion. Despite that, Sui thought the design was unique. Meanwhile, Rain stood outside, listening to the girls' chatter, feeling happy that they appreciated his work. Afterward, Rain decided to add soundproofing and make the walls thicker. At this point, the conversation among the girls took an unexpected turn. They began talking about each other's chests. Rain overheard this and felt awkward. Kiri, meanwhile, declared that having large breasts was just a burden, causing her constant shoulder pain. She said if she could, she would give her chest to Arya. Arya was shocked to hear this, thinking large breasts would just get in the way. Kiri didn't like Arya's comment, so she started poking at the girls' chests to help them be less of a burden. Arya blushed and demanded that Kiri stop pulling on her chest. Kiri confidently said Rain would definitely like her chest, and Arya, blushing even more, protested that there was no reason for her to show her chest to Rain. At this point, Rain, standing outside and overhearing everything, collapsed in embarrassment, holding his head, and wondering, why is it always me? He tried convincing himself that he didn't hear anything and didn't care at all. To distract himself, Rain focused on creating drawings and forced himself not to think about what he'd just heard. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't succeed. The girls continued their conversation, talking about someone gaining weight and their chests bouncing. Meanwhile, Rain forced himself not to listen and concentrated on building the walls. Eventually, the girls finished bathing and started getting dressed. Kiri confidently said that Rain wasn't the type of guy to peek. She assured them that he was a good person they could rely on. Arya hoped Kiri was right. As Miria brushed her hair, she added that she also didn't think Rain was a bad person. Arya, irritated, reminded them that Rain was just their worker and nothing more, but they told her not to get upset. A little later, the girls stepped outside, enjoying the cool air after their bath. Meanwhile, Rain kept muttering to himself, convincing himself he didn't hear anything as he plastered the walls. Arya walked over and overheard him mumbling, asking what he was saying, but Rain didn't respond. The girls just wanted to let him know that he could take a bath now. Night fell, and the forest became chaotic. The monsters awoke and went out to hunt. But something was wrong. Suddenly, the head of one of the monsters was severed and fell somewhere in the bushes. The remaining wolves howled at the moon. The next day, Arya once again thanked Rain for the new bath and suggested he work hard today for the village's sake. Rain, however, wasn't too thrilled about the suggestion since he was feeling exhausted. Kiri suddenly remembered and asked Arya when she would officially register Rain as a villager. Rain didn't understand why registration was necessary and asked the girls about it. Miria reminded everyone that only men could register new members in the village, but Arya had done it before. As soon as the mention of the village being near the demon forest came up, everyone refused to register. Rain understood why, as the forest was truly dangerous. Even 100 soldiers wouldn't be enough to handle it. No one wanted to take the risk. The girls started urging Rain to go and register their names, saying they could only rely on him now. Arya told Rain he just needed to go to the town hall for registration, and they would handle the rest. Rain agreed, but planned to go later, as he first wanted to find someone to work for the girls. He admitted that he had only come to this place by chance, and when the demon forest was calm again, he would leave. Lin was saddened by this, as without Rain, she wouldn't have anyone to teach her magic. But Rain reassured her, promising to teach her everything she needed to know to protect the village, even though he couldn't stay forever. Kiri was also upset by his decision and asked Rain why he wanted to leave. Rain didn't know how to explain it to the girls. Arya, however, seemed to accept it, saying that Rain had already done so much for their village and it wouldn't be fair to force him to stay. But Kiri kept questioning Rain, asking if there was something he didn't like about their village. Miria supported Arya's decision, and Kiri finally relented, deciding to follow everyone else's lead and let Rain go. Arya then warned Rain that it would take about a week to reach the town hall, so it would be best for him to leave early. After some time preparing, Rain was ready to depart. Arya decided to accompany him, putting on a warm coat. She looked at Rain and asked if he was really okay with his clothes, saying it would be very cold on the way. But Rain reassured her, explaining that he was using a type of magic called wind protection. Arya was surprised by this, as she had never heard of such a spell. Rain decided to show her. He raised his hand toward Arya and spoke a few appropriate words. After a moment, Arya noticed that she no longer felt the cold. She realized that this magic was protecting Rain from the cold wind as well. On the road, Arya mentioned that the area near the demon forest had a warm climate, but they couldn't forget that they were in the north, where it was usually very cold. She shared that every time she travelled to the town hall, she felt freezing. But now, thanks to Rain and his magic, she no longer feared the cold. Rain just smiled, happy he could help Arya. At that moment, Arya admitted that Rain's magic seemed almost limitless to her. She thought that no matter which country Rain went to, he could become a saviour. But with his head lowered, Rain confessed that things hadn't always been this way. He told Arya how people often mocked him for his magic, and how he never received any thanks. Rain also revealed that he had only come to this place because he was cast out of his home, and now he had nowhere left to go. Hearing this, Arya was surprised. She suddenly realized that Rain was much like her. In this country, a person's status depended on their magical abilities, and without magic, you weren't even considered human. When she was younger, Arya was summoned to her father's office. He had heard that Arya couldn't learn magic, even after trying with the most renowned royal sorcerers. He decided that someone as insignificant as Arya didn't deserve to bear the Framia name. Her father declared that Arya had lost the right to carry the family name and cast her out of the house, without caring where she went or how she would survive. After hearing Arya's story, Rain's eyes filled with regret. But Arya assured him that this village had become his home and that all the girls were now his family. Rain began to understand Arya, and he even felt a little envious of her. She added that Rain could stay in their village forever. However, just as she said this, Rain interrupted her and asked her to be quiet. He had spotted monsters ahead and immediately warned Arya. Arya didn't understand why the monsters had appeared, since they never left the demon forest without a reason. At that moment, Rain noticed that the monsters seemed afraid of something. In an instant, the wolves began howling, and the sound was so loud that Arya had to cover her ears. Afterward, the wolves started moving somewhere, growling threateningly as they went. Confused, Arya asked Rain what was happening, but Rain simply suggested that they return to the village quickly. He warned that trouble might be on its way. Arya didn't understand why Rain seemed so tense. Rain explained that when the forest is damaged, it accumulates magical energy to heal itself, and the monsters can absorb that energy. However, this time, something else had absorbed the remaining mana and was now dwelling in the forest, scaring even the other monsters. This meant that a very powerful demon had appeared near the village. Arya realized what Rain was implying, A powerful demon was nearby, and she decided they should head back immediately. But they were already halfway down the road. Rain saw the panic in Arya's eyes and told her not to worry. He lifted her into his arms and told her to hold on tightly. Arya wasn't prepared for this and wanted to ask Rain to slow down, but he advised her not to talk too much to avoid biting her tongue. Before Arya could ask if Rain was using body enhancement magic, they were already speeding back toward the village at a dizzying pace. Meanwhile, Kiri, unsuspecting, decided to fetch some water, but realized she would have to walk a long way to get it. She thought it would be a great idea to ask Rain to build a well near the village when he returned. Just then, strange noises came from the forest. As she looked ahead, Kiri dropped her water bucket in shock. In front of her was a terrifying wolf-like monster, unlike anything she had ever seen. Half a day earlier, Lin walked into the house holding 2 rabbits she had caught. She wanted to show off her catch to everyone. Miria was thrilled to see the large rabbits, while Kiri, less impressed, asked if Lin was sure they weren't monster rabbits. But Lin didn't think they resembled monsters, and it was true. They hadn't turned to stone after dying, as monsters usually did. Miria even thought about how amazing it would be if they could eat monster meat. Kiri and Lin, on the other hand, weren't concerned with that idea. Kiri reminded Lin to be more careful when going into the forest, because even though Rain had created a protective moat around the village, the demon forest was still dangerous. Miria was worried about Arya and Rain, knowing they had gone to the town hall. But Lin reassured her, confidently stating that she could protect everyone. Lin believed they could defeat any monster since they had been trained by Rain himself. When Kiri decided to fetch water, some time passed, and Miria, Sui and Lin were inside the house, preparing the rabbits Lin had brought back. Just then, Kiri burst into the house, panicked, shocking everyone. She was out of breath and looked exhausted. The girls immediately rushed to her, bombarding her with questions about what had happened, but Kiri motioned for them to be quiet. Once everything calmed down, she explained that a giant black wolf had emerged from the demon forest. Kiri insisted that she had never seen this creature before, and it had managed to leap over the moat that Rain had built. However, Miria recalled Rain's words, assuring them that monsters couldn't cross the moat. With her usual optimism, Lin tried to calm Kiri down, suggesting they worry about it after lunch. But suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the house, followed by a rumbling on the roof. The girls were terrified, too scared to move. After a moment, a loud howl pierced the air, and everything on the shelves began to fall. Despite her fearlessness, Lin approached the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wolf whose howl she had never heard before. That's when the wolf appeared, lurking right below the window, staring curiously at Lin. The girls were paralyzed with fear, unable to move. Before they could blink, the wolf lunged at the window, shattering the glass into tiny pieces. Lin immediately recognized what kind of monster it was, while Kiri screamed, saying this was the very wolf she had mentioned earlier, and it had indeed managed to cross the moat. The girls were unsure of what to do since Rain wasn't in the village. Kiri suggested calling Rain for help, but Miria opposed the idea, saying it was impossible since Rain and Arya were too far away. Miria suggested they hide in a room and barricade the door for now. Once the girls were safely inside the room, the wolf continued its rampage, destroying everything in sight. Lin started to worry, wondering when the wolf would leave. However, Sui didn't think it would retreat. She insisted that the wolf had mocked them when it first saw them, and indeed, it had smirked during its initial attack. Lin began to wonder if they could defeat the wolf the way her brother, Rain, had done. But Kiri urged her to stop thinking like that and focus on surviving until Rain returned. At that moment, Miria said she remembered something important. She claimed that Rain had left them with special artifacts for situations like this. Everyone was overjoyed at the news, praising Rain for his thoughtfulness. Lin eagerly asked where the artifacts were, and Miria replied that they were in Rain's room. In the heat of the moment, Lin excitedly suggested they quickly retrieve the artifacts and defeat the monster. Without hesitation, the girls rushed into Rain's room and began searching for the artifacts Miria had mentioned. Kiri anxiously urged them to find the artifacts as soon as possible, asking Miria, who was standing at the door, to come help with the search. But Miria had a different plan. She stepped out of the room and locked the door from the outside. The girls inside quickly realized what had happened and immediately begged her to open the door. However, Miria calmly told them to stay put and not come out until everything was quiet. Kiri realized that Miria intended to act as bait for the wolf. She began pounding on the door, begging Miria not to do something so reckless. but Miria simply reminded Kiri to take care of the others. Then, without hesitation, she ran toward the door, half shouting for her friends not to stop her. Meanwhile, Lin argued that they needed to find a way to bring Kiri back. But Miria simply reminded Kiri to take care of the others. She had never heard of monsters being so different from regular animals. When they attacked villages, not even the bones of their victims were left behind. Miria didn't know if this was true, but she believed Rain could handle the situation. Miria thought there was only one option left. She hoped the demon would be satisfied with just her, and though she didn't have much faith, she believed that if her instinct was right, the others would be saved. Miria's hands trembled as she gripped the door handle, but she knew she had to stay calm. Finally, she opened the door and decided to run as far as she could without looking back, as the house could be destroyed even further. But immediately, the terrifying wolf appeared in front of her, its horrifying face and growls filling Miria with dread. She couldn't believe she hadn't even bought herself a little more time. Closing her eyes, she thought of her family and the ones she loved, Sui, Lin, Arya, and Kiri. In the end, Miria resolved that she was ready to sacrifice herself to protect the smiles of those she cherished. With her eyes shut, Miria prepared for the worst. But suddenly, rocks and earth began flying at the monster. Miria opened her eyes and turned around, seeing the girls. They had decided to attack the creature using earth magic. Miria couldn't understand what her friends were doing, as she had told them to hide. But they demanded that she stay quiet and assured her they wouldn't let her die alone. At that moment, the monster's gaze shifted back to Miria. Sui and Lin's strength had already been drained, and the creature didn't seem fazed at all. It opened its jaws ready to swallow Miria whole, but suddenly a massive chunk of earth rose from the ground, lifting the monster and preventing it from devouring Miria. Miria looked at the creature, confused by what had just happened. Sui, Lin, and Kiri stood frozen in shock as well. At that moment, the monster crashed back to the ground, and a cloak appeared behind Miria. It was Rain, along with Arya. Lin and Sui were overjoyed to see them return. Arya rushed over to Miria, who was still sitting on the ground, and asked what had happened. Arya explained that they had heard the terrifying howls on their way and decided to come back. Rain, though relieved that Miria was unharmed, didn't show it. Instead, he simply ordered the girls to stay put while he moved toward the monster. By then, the creature had regained its footing, standing on all fours right in front of Rain. Normally, the magic Rain used would have destroyed a monster instantly, but this time he realized the beast was much stronger than any he had faced before. Rain was certain that this creature shouldn't have been here and seemed to be acting on blind instinct. Looking at its claws, Rain suspected the monster might be trying to flee, but he knew that wasn't an option. Determined not to let such a dangerous creature escape, Rain steeled himself to end it. The monster, sensing its chances of survival slipping away, had only one option left. As Rain prepared, he unleashed a powerful spell to finish the beast. When the creature bit into his shoulder, it quickly realized it couldn't harm him. At that moment, Rain simply swung his arm, and the monster was sent flying far into the mountains. The girls watched in awe, stunned by Rain's immense strength. Finally, the monster collided with the mountain, causing a massive explosion. After a moment, they could see that the creature had punched a hole through the entire mountain. All that remained were piles of rubble. Their home was now in ruins. Kiri, upset, began scolding Miria, asking why she chose to sacrifice herself for the others. Miria lowered her head, silently apologizing. Lin tried to comfort Kiri, telling her to calm down, but Kiri yelled at Lin too, insisting that she would handle this herself. Kiri couldn't understand why Miria would do something so reckless. She could have died. With tears streaming down her face, she said they would all be heartbroken if that had happened. Meanwhile, Rain stood next to the magic stones left behind by the monster, lost in thought. Arya approached him, asking why he was standing there and if something was wrong. Rain, startled by her sudden approach, didn't expect it. She couldn't understand why he looked so sad when he had just saved them all. But Rain remained silent. Arya called his name again and decided to gather the other girls who had just experienced a terrifying moment. They all walked over and began thanking him for his help, even hugging him. But Rain chose to apologize instead. He felt guilty for putting them in danger and thought he shouldn't have left the village unprotected. He believed that, upon reflection, it was all his fault. However, the girls didn't understand why Rain was apologizing. After all, he was the one who saved them. Arya stepped forward, took his hand, and told him to lift his head. When Rain did, she assured him that it wasn't his fault. Arya insisted that she was the one who had dragged him to the town, so the responsibility was hers. She emphasized that thanks to Rain, no one was hurt, as he had defeated the monster. In the end, Arya sincerely thanked Rain from the bottom of her heart for saving them. Lin and Sui both agreed with Arya, as they felt Rain had truly helped them countless times. Arya continued, saying that she wanted to apologize. She admitted that until now she hadn't fully trusted Rain and had treated him unfairly. Even though Kiri and Miria were about to protest, Arya insisted it was the truth. She confessed that, at first, she only wanted to use Rain for the village's benefit. Every day, she worried he might leave, as he had no real reason to stay in their village. But not only did Rain stay, he also helped them tremendously. With tears in her eyes, Arya said that despite her selfishness, Rain continued to help their village. She tearfully confessed that Rain was a truly good person as she wiped away her tears. Finally, Arya gathered all her courage and apologized to Rain from the heart. She also added that she had a request. She hoped Rain would stay in the village and become part of their family. Rain, however, decided that he needed to go to the town hall first. He also sadly remembered that tomorrow he would need to repair the damaged house. Rain planned to think about a new defense strategy against demons, but he suggested everyone rest for the night. When Arya noticed Rain's face turning as red as a tomato, she curiously asked about it. Rain, uncomfortable, snapped back that his face wasn't red at all. That night, the girls and Rain slept together in a ruined house. At one point, Rain wondered why all the girls were sleeping in the same room as him. Miria explained that after the attack, Rain's room was the only one left intact, and with the rain pouring outside, no one wanted to sleep anywhere else. Lin and Sui were also asleep beside him, and he didn't want to wake them. However, Rain felt uneasy with the situation and realized he needed to rebuild the house as soon as possible. After the demon attack, their food supply was nearly depleted and wouldn't last long. Still, Kiri remained optimistic, pointing out that at least they had some food left, while Arya longed for a good meal after all the stress they had been through. Kiri advised Arya not to be upset, explaining that the worst thing wasn't the lack of food, but that their home was now nothing more than a pile of rubble. Arya, frustrated, thought she should ask Rain to rebuild the house, as living in such ruins was impossible. However, Kiri wondered how Rain could possibly rebuild everything, as it would take a lot of time. She also felt that asking for Rain's help again didn't seem right, especially since they still needed to plan a welcome party. Suddenly, the ground beneath the girls started to tremble, making them think there was an earthquake. Just then, Miria entered the room and asked Arya and Kiri what was happening. Arya responded that they should run outside, as staying indoors could be dangerous. When the girls rushed outside, they were shocked by what they saw. A grand mansion standing before them. Without thinking much, they headed toward the door of the magnificent house. Arya was certain it was Rain's work, while Miria, having seen so much since meeting Rain, wasn't surprised anymore. Kiri just stood there, stunned. Finally, Arya opened the door and stepped inside. Immediately she called out, asking if Rain was there. There was only silence, but what they saw inside left the girls in awe once again. The interior of the house was stunning. At that moment, Rain's voice came from behind them. He apologized, understanding that the girls were shocked. Arya turned around and saw Rain standing there with Sui and Lin. Rain began to explain that staying in a house nearly destroyed by monsters was too dangerous, and they didn't know when another attack might happen. So he had decided to rebuild the house immediately. He apologized for not informing the girls beforehand. The girls, on the other hand, were simply astonished that Rain had rebuilt the house so quickly. Hosting a party in a destroyed house seemed odd to them. Arya only asked Rain to let them know next time if he planned to do something like this again. Miria, surprised by how sweet Arya could be, found it quite unexpected. Arya, irritated, asked Miria who she thought she was. Meanwhile, Rain explained the layout of the house and directed the girls to the kitchen, suggesting they cook something since no one had eaten breakfast yet. When they stepped into the kitchen, they were even more amazed. They couldn't believe their eyes. The kitchen looked incredible. The girls joked that with a kitchen like this, they could eat gourmet meals every day. A little while later, everyone had finished eating, and their plates were empty. Rain then shared the story of what had happened to him before he arrived at the village. The girls were shocked to hear the tale and thought the king was a fool. However, Rain told them it was all in the past and advised them not to dwell on the bad things. Kiri, angry upon hearing how Rain had been mistreated, declared she would destroy the country Rain came from. Rain quickly urged everyone to calm down. Arya added that every country had its share of bad people, and their village was no exception. Arya admitted she had acted rudely and apologized to Rain again. At some point, Rain noticed that the mood had become heavy. Suddenly, Arya broke the silence, asking Rain if all of this meant he had come to their country to start a new life. She suggested that in that case, Rain could stay and live in their village. Rain reassured Arya not to worry. He admitted that he really liked their village. After all, in his old country, everyone only looked for reasons to slander him, except for one truly kind person. However, the girls had accepted Rain as part of their family. He said that was enough to make him happy, as long as they could all eat well and laugh together. But before Rain could finish speaking, Kiri threw herself at him, tears streaming down her face. She hugged him tightly, pressing his head against her chest, feeling sorry for all he had been through, and said that Rain probably couldn't help but cry. But Rain only felt pain and struggled to breathe. At that moment, he remembered there was something else he wanted to ask the girls. He was curious why only girls remained in the village. The question took the girls by surprise. They exchanged glances for a moment before deciding to tell Rain the truth. The girls explained that over half of the men in the village had died during a demon attack. The remaining villagers, fearing another attack, decided to leave the village. That's when tragedy struck. Some of the men conspired to steal the village's food supplies and flee in the middle of the night. Arya explained that this betrayal was why she hadn't been able to trust Rain right away. Rain understood, realizing that anyone would be cautious with a stranger. Just then, Lin happily appeared and began praising Rain for the beautiful house, with its many rooms and even a second floor. Kiri, realizing Lin was being playful, prepared to scold her. But Lin confessed she was just bored with all the serious talk, and, to avoid getting scolded by Kiri, she shouted her usual phrase, "I protest against violence." Rain then offered to give the girls a tour of the house. He had put in a lot of effort and wanted the girls to appreciate his hard work. They began walking down the hallway, checking each room, and couldn't stop complimenting Rain's craftsmanship. He explained that he made the house bigger so they could each have their own room to choose from. The girls were amazed at Rain's skill and realized just how incredible magic could be. Rain then led Miria to the dressing room and after that, to the main bathroom. When Miria saw the bathtub, she was stunned. Rain explained that he had renovated it because the old one had several floors. Returning to the living room, Lin greeted him cheerfully and invited him to check out the second floor. When everyone went upstairs, Rain mentioned that he had added 2 new rooms on the second floor. The first room was a library, and this news had a mixed effect on Sui and Lin. Sui was absolutely thrilled, while Lin clearly wasn't a fan of books. Rain explained that the library held many books on learning magic, all neatly arranged on the shelves. At this, Sui immediately decided that she was going to live in the library. Arya picked up one of the books from the shelf, and after examining it, she realized that such books couldn't be found anywhere in their country. If the royal wizards saw this library, they'd surely be green with envy. Rain encouraged the girls not to hesitate to use the library as much as they liked. Then he approached Lin and gently patted her head. Lin looked up and asked what was going on, and Rain replied with a question of his own. "Are you bored?" Lin answered that instead of reading, she preferred training since she wasn't very skilled yet. Rain then led her to another room, confident this would be one she'd love. As he opened the door, Rain and Lin stepped into the training room. Lin was overjoyed. The room was spacious, with targets that she was excited to practice with. Rain added that he'd placed protective magic on the walls so they wouldn't break. At that moment, the other girls arrived, and they were equally impressed with the training room. After that, Rain said there was still one more surprise and asked them to follow him. First, they went back downstairs, then through another door before starting to climb another staircase. Even though Arya asked where the stairs led, Rain kept it a mystery. As they climbed, Lin and Sui grew a bit tired from all the steps, but Rain reassured them that they were almost there. Finally, they reached their destination. Rain led them to an observatory, where they could see the entire surrounding landscape. The girls gazed out of the large windows, marveling at the beauty of nature. They had never seen the mountains from such a height before. For the next few minutes, the girls took in the stunning scenery, while Rain stood back, quietly satisfied with his work. Suddenly, Lin noticed that walls had appeared around the village. She was surprised, wondering when Rain had the time to do this. Rain replied that he had built them early in the morning, while everyone was still asleep. Arya said she could wake up at the slightest noise, so she didn't understand how she hadn't noticed. Melia simply suggested that maybe they had all slept very deeply last night. Lin complained that the windows in the hallway were too high, making it impossible for her to see anything. Rain chuckled and promised to think about fixing that. Then, Arya approached Rain and told him that not only had he helped protect the village, but he had also agreed to teach them magic. Rain, a little confused, didn't fully understand what Arya meant, so he asked for clarification. Arya explained that even someone like her, who had no natural talent for magic, had been given the chance to grow stronger thanks to him. Because of him, they all had the opportunity to protect their home themselves. But before Arya could finish, Rain suddenly placed his hand on her shoulder. He realized that what Arya was implying was that he could ask for anything he wanted in return. This caught Arya off guard, and she couldn't say anything in response. Then, Rain said that in that case, what he wanted was for their training to continue. He was sure the girls would give it their all, and he told them he looked forward to seeing their progress. That was when Arya realized what she had agreed to. A moment later, Rain announced that he wanted the girls to train in the demon forest, which made Arya very upset. She didn't understand why they couldn't continue training inside the house and thought the demon forest was far too dangerous. Rain then asked the girls what they thought of the demon forest, and they each gave their opinion. Kiri said the demon forest was meaningless death, while Sui thought it was truly hell. Miria thought for a moment and said the forest was the lair of demons. Lin added that stepping into the demon forest was practically suicide. Rain agreed that they were all right, but not completely. He explained that the demon forest had its own advantages and asked if any of the girls knew what those were. Miria responded that everything in the demon forest grows faster. Lin, trying to sound clever, suggested it was because of the warm temperatures inside the forest. At this point, Arya interrupted, saying they already knew that, but she didn't understand what it had to do with their training. Rain explained to Arya that the demon forest was filled with powerful magical energy, which meant their process of learning magic would be much faster. This made Arya a bit uneasy. However, Rain quickly calculated everything and added that 1 year of training in the demon forest was equivalent to 10 years of training outside. The girls couldn't believe their ears. Rain explained that he had learned about this when he was a demon-hunting noble. Arya realized Rain was saying that if they trained in the demon forest, they would become much stronger and faster in a shorter time. To measure their progress, Rain brought along some cards. At first, Arya thought they were the same magic detection cards Rain had given them before, but Rain explained that these cards worked differently. Arya tried channeling mana into the card, and text began to appear. Rain explained that the previous cards were used to determine their magic element, but these cards displayed their physical attributes. After looking at Arya's stats, Rain commented that her endurance wasn't bad, but her strength was an issue. Arya thought that might be because she had been training quite a bit. Rain then suggested that the other girls try channeling mana into the cards as well, and their results varied, but were all promising in different ways. Afterward, Rain led them into the demon forest, and the girls couldn't believe they had actually arrived. They were all quite scared. Rain decided to demonstrate a few spells and asked them to watch closely. He started by showing them a body enhancement spell, which increased physical capabilities. Rain also mentioned that the longer they used the spell, the more strength it would require to maintain. He assured them that with body enhancement, they could even overpower an unenhanced demon. Rain then began explaining something else to the girls. He found some herbs that only grew in the demon forest and gently touched them. Rain explained that these plants needed to be harvested carefully. Curious, Kiri asked if they couldn't just pick them normally. Rain explained that by using a gathering spell, the plant's freshness would be preserved indefinitely. If picked by hand, the herb would lose most of its healing properties. He also added that the plants needed to be stored in a safe place, because if placed in a regular bottle, it could easily break. But with an enhancement spell cast on the bottle, it would be much sturdier. Rain then told the girls that if they could find these herbs and bring them back, their training session would be over. It sounded simple enough, but Rain suddenly noticed the strange expression on Arya's face. She confessed that she thought Rain was going to ask them to defeat some powerful demon. Rain was surprised by this and asked if she thought he was a monster for suggesting such a thing. He realized that such a task would be too dangerous for the girls at this point. Arya then asked if they needed to fight at all, and Rain responded that first, they needed to increase their magical energy. He gave the example of the wolves, explaining that they typically had around 10 mana units. Rain said that Arya currently had only 3 mana units, and to handle the wolves, she would need at least 7. Miria then asked why they couldn't just train by strengthening their muscles, but Rain explained that it wouldn't help. He suggested that the girls start searching for the precious herbs, and if they encountered any demons, they should immediately run away. Rain emphasized that they were not yet strong enough to handle demons, and pointed out that they seemed more tired than usual. It was at that moment that the girls realized they were, in fact, exhausted, despite not having done much. Rain explained that the deeper they ventured into the forest, the heavier the magical pressure weighed down on them. If they got too close to the center of the forest, the pressure could be lethal. That was why they were already feeling so drained. He wanted them to understand that they needed to gradually get used to the forest's overwhelming pressure. At this point, a completely worn-out Lin realized that learning magic was not going to be easy. Rain added that based on everything he had said, it was clear that the girls shouldn't venture deeper into the forest. Lin, who had been eager to explore further, now promised she wouldn't go anywhere. Rain thought for a moment and realized that the demon forest could be considered a dungeon of sorts. Lin, still a bit confused, asked him to explain further. Rain then told the girls that he had been in the demon forest once before, and as he ventured through the dense woods, he discovered a volcano. A little further on, he came across a desert. So, the demon forest was a very strange place. Hearing Rain's story, Lin and Sui seemed to regain their energy and wanted to go back into the demon forest because they thought it sounded fascinating. But Rain didn't see it that way. He tried to make them understand that stumbling into an abyss without realizing it wasn't fun at all. Being relentlessly chased by demons wasn't fun. Going days without eating or sleeping wasn't enjoyable. And constantly searching for a safe place to rest wasn't something to look forward to. After hearing this, Lin quickly took back her words. After finishing his explanation, Rain decided to let the girls search for medicinal herbs on their own. A while later, several jars filled with herbs were placed on the table in the ancestral house of the girls. Rain had shown Kiri a spell called Extraction, using one of the herbs as an example. He enthusiastically explained to Kiri that the liquid from the medicinal plant could be extracted using this spell. She carefully observed the jar of liquid, then asked how it could be used. Rain gave an example, saying the extracted liquid could be used as a replacement for fertilizer. Kiri found the example amusing and thought Rain was joking. It was at that moment that Rain realized the girls were ready to move on to the next stage of training. However, he also noticed they weren't as effective when working individually. So, Rain considered grouping them together. Eventually, he decided to do just that and felt the need to assign each of them specific roles. At first, the girls didn't understand what Rain was talking about, so he explained that he wanted each person to have a defined role to know what their job was within the group. Rain said that as they grew stronger, certain traits would develop better than others. He added that when training in the demon forest, they should consider each other's strengths. For example, Arya would be suited for the role of a tank, while Lin could take on the role of a scout. After explaining this to the girls, Rain asked if they understood what he was saying. Arya immediately protested, saying she was already the village leader. Meanwhile, Lin interpreted Rain's words as meaning she just had to climb trees and scout the area, a job she absolutely loved. Then Rain began assigning specific roles. He believed Sui could support the group with her magic, and Kiri would help by crafting potions and gathering ingredients. Finally, when it came to Miria, Rain confidently declared that she would be best suited for the role of a healer. The other girls were delighted that Miria was assigned the role of healer. After all, it was an incredibly useful role, and with Miria's healing abilities, they wouldn't have to worry about injuries anymore. Though Miria accepted the role, her face still seemed sad for some reason. One day, Rain came home utterly exhausted and drained of energy. Kiri noticed how tired he was and offered to make him some tea. Rain took a sip and enjoyed it so much that he asked what kind of tea it was. Kiri explained that she had brewed it from a medicinal herb found in the demon forest. She added that she'd read in a book that these herbs help reduce fatigue, so she decided to make the tea for him. Rain felt satisfied and refreshed, suggesting that Kiri collect more of those herbs in the future. Later, the group went outside for training. Today's session was outdoors. Kiri asked Rain how everyone was progressing, and Rain replied that his students had made significant improvements. Sui was practicing her water magic, and though she controlled it well, it didn't last long, and all the water in the air came crashing down on her head. Meanwhile, Lin wasn't wasting any time. She was working on her earth magic, but something went wrong, and she ended up buried under a pile of dirt. However, this didn't stop her. Rain advised Lin to stop her mana flow and suggested she take a break and wash up. Kiri, observing from a distance, noticed a pattern in Lin's training. She realized that the stronger Lin became, the more bizarre her mistakes grew. At the same time, Arya was training her own skills and asked Rain to check her progress. Arya proudly said that after practice, she was now able to crush a rock and seemed to have learned how to use body enhancement magic. However, Rain advised Arya to focus on improving her magic rather than just building muscle. Still, he admitted that what she accomplished was impressive. Finally, Kiri decided to train herself, and she successfully created a potion. She handed the potion to Rain for evaluation, growing anxious about the outcome. Rain carefully compared his potion with Kiri's. In the end, Kiri's potion looked noticeably different from Rain's, and the quantity was smaller. Kiri felt completely disappointed with the result, assuming her potion wasn't good enough. But Rain was genuinely impressed and praised her, saying that achieving such a result in a short time was truly remarkable. Rain admitted that when he first started, it took him much longer. So he complimented Kiri for doing such a great job, which made her blush and smile. At that moment, Miria appeared from the next room. Kiri noticed her and called her over, but Miria reacted strangely, leading Kiri to realize that Miria was about to repeat her usual behavior. She explained to Rain, who didn't quite understand the situation yet, that Miria had been going out a lot recently. This made Rain concerned, so he asked Kiri what was going on. Kiri responded that it seemed Miria was worried about something, and that Miria had never shown anyone her magic training. This only deepened Rain's concern. Meanwhile, Miria had already left the house and wandered into the forest. Rain decided to follow her to see what was going on. As he stepped outside, Rain wondered if Miria was secretly practicing magic, but if that was the case, why wouldn't she want to approach him? Finally, Rain found Miria standing with her back to him, near a tree. Looking closer, he realized she was doing something with a needle in her hand. She pricked her finger, drawing blood, and then used healing magic to try to heal the wound. But after waiting for a moment, Miria realized she had failed. This wasn't the first time she'd failed, so she seemed quite disheartened. Just then, Rain called her name. Miria was startled by his sudden appearance. Rain immediately apologized for following her without permission. He only wanted to say that if she was having trouble with something, she could always talk to him about it. Miria then explained that she had difficulty using healing magic. She said this problem seemed to only affect her, and even the priests didn't know why. She told Rain that she had once mentioned she couldn't use magic, and that also applied to healing magic. She explained that to learn healing, one had to be trained in a church, and her family had spent a lot of money on her training. However, despite all the guidance, she still couldn't succeed. In the end, even the priest gave up on her. Additionally, Miria used to be a noble, and when she failed, her family turned their backs on her, which led her to live in this village. After hearing her entire story, Rain understood the issue. Miria, with a sad expression, added that after seeing the others work so hard in their training, she wanted to try again. She said she had read all the magic books in the library, but nothing worked. Miria explained that her magic would activate, but nothing would happen. Rain thought carefully about Miria's last words, about how the magic activated, but didn't heal her wounds. Meanwhile, Miria, with teary eyes but a smile on her face, said she couldn't help Rain in the demon forest, and that she felt like a burden to everyone. However, Rain assured her that wasn't the case. He firmly stated that he would teach magic to everyone, and Miria wouldn't be an exception. Rain didn't ask more about her past, but emphasized that he wasn't like the priest who had given up on her. He also smiled and said he had an idea to help her. Hearing this, Miria felt a sense of hope. Rain decided not to delay and got started immediately. First, he rolled up his sleeve, then suddenly used a spell to cut his own arm, causing a fair amount of blood to flow. Seeing this, Miria panicked, not understanding why Rain would do such a thing. She asked him why he had just cut his arm. Miria immediately jumped up, panicking as she tried to figure out what to do since the wound was deep. She decided that it would be best to go back home right away, but Rain insisted there was no need to return home and that she should heal the wound herself. Miria, confused, didn't understand how she could possibly do that. Rain suggested that she use healing magic to close the wound, but Miria insisted it was impossible, that she couldn't heal. Rain told her she was wrong, but she didn't understand what he meant. He then asked if she knew how a wound naturally heals. In tears, Miria replied that she didn't know, as she wasn't a healer. She kept repeating that they needed to hurry home. Rain, however, explained that this was exactly the problem. He said that in healing magic, One must clearly visualize the regeneration of cells and the wound closing itself. Rain reminded her to picture the wound healing in her mind. Miria listened to Rain's instructions and decided to try healing once more. She reached out toward Rain's wound and began to focus on healing it. Rain advised her to imagine the blood clotting over the wound, creating a clear mental image of the process. Miria followed his guidance and tried as he had explained. Rain then added that she needed to make the blood clot and the cells regenerate. If she could do that, the wound would disappear immediately. However, no matter how hard Miria tried, she couldn't fully visualize the process of healing the wound. She began to panic as she saw Rain's blood still flowing from the cut. Sensing her panic, Rain calmly told her to take a deep breath and try again. Miria closed her eyes, realizing that Rain trusted her and that she couldn't allow herself to lose focus. When she tried once more, the blood began to clot and the wound gradually started to heal. Miria had finally succeeded, and suddenly a bright light shone from Rain's hand. In just a moment, the wound on his arm had completely vanished, leaving no trace behind. Rain was thrilled that Miria had done it, proving to her that healing wasn't as impossible as she had thought. But as soon as Rain finished speaking, Miria rushed toward him and hugged him tightly. She said she had been so worried, and with tears streaming down her face, she begged Rain never to do something like that again. Even though she had asked him to teach her magic, Rain realized his mistake and felt the need to apologize to Miria. Later, as the sun began to set, everyone gathered for dinner. Miria, still a little upset, set the food on the table for Rain. He thanked her and commented that everything looked delicious. Lin noticed something seemed off with Rain and asked him about it, but Rain assured her he was fine. Kiri also sensed that something wasn't quite right with Rain, and she even guessed that he had probably done something wrong again. Rain just thought Miria was still upset with him, and he felt like he should apologize to her once more, but later. At this moment, Rain turned to everyone and announced that starting tomorrow, they would begin training in the Demon Forest. Some of the girls were excited by this news, while others felt they weren't strong enough yet and that the time hadn't come. Arya hadn't expected this day to arrive so soon, but Rain assured them that they had trained hard and learned the basic skills for their roles. He believed they were ready to train in the Demon Forest. From Rain's words, Lin and Sui concluded that Miria had mastered healing magic, and they were overjoyed. Miria admitted that she had struggled with the spell before, but today it had worked. She also pointed out that her success was thanks to Rain's help. Both Rain and the other girls were happy to hear this. Afterward, everyone agreed to give their best effort during the training session the next day. The next morning, Lin sat on a tree branch in the Demon Forest, keeping watch for anything unusual. Later, the girls came down to report to Rain that everything was clear. Rain then decided they should split up from that point, but Arya had a question. With a frustrated expression, burdened by the heavy load she was carrying, she asked Rain if he was trying to get back at her by making her carry so much. Arya couldn't believe they would be training with magic in such a state, but Rain argued that there was no better method for improving physical strength than through training. However, he realized that Arya's burden was too heavy and decided to adjust the exercise, even though it wouldn't be as effective. But after hearing this, Arya chose to keep the heavy load on her back. She said she could endure and overcome anything. Otherwise, how could she protect others? Looking at Arya, Rain suddenly remembered that he had once gone through something similar, so he wished her luck. Afterward, Rain instructed the girls to split into groups to begin their training, while he stayed nearby to step in if any danger arose. A little while later, Kiri was diligently gathering the herbs they needed, working so hard that she accidentally tore her clothes. Miria heard this and offered to mend them for Kiri when they got back home. Lin then jokingly suggested that Kiri should ask their grandmother for a new outfit. Arya, overhearing this, became furious and demanded that they stop calling that woman grandmother. Rain, puzzled by who they were referring to, asked the girls for an explanation. Miria clarified that Lin was talking about the Countess, the ruler of this territory. Arya added that the Countess's name was Alicia Floria, and she was her aunt. Arya proudly declared that her aunt was a remarkable woman who had fought in countless battles, with her name known across every nation. Kiri thought that Alicia could easily be considered a living legend. Alicia, the goddess of fire, Alicia, the dragon slayer, Alicia, the supreme judge, Alicia, the purple blade. These were the titles people gave her. Miria noted that Alicia was incredibly powerful and also ruled over an entire duchy on her own. Rain, hearing all the intense stories from the girls, quickly realized that Alicia was truly an extraordinary person. Miria added that when their village was still developing, Alicia had appointed Arya as the village leader and had helped them many times during difficult periods. Kiri also mentioned that Alicia often sent them new clothes. The girls then decided to ask Arya to thank Alicia for all her help when they saw her next, as it had been a long time since Arya had visited her. Arya understood, but she also admitted that she was quite afraid of Alicia. Rain concluded that Alicia must be very strict, given all the rumors about her. At that moment, Lin and Sui suddenly noticed something unusual and told Rain about it. Rain looked in the direction the girls were pointing and saw some rather strange-looking trees. Rain said he would go ahead and told the others to follow behind. That night, in a grand mansion, a tense conversation unfolded. A woman received news from her subordinate that only 5 girls were living in the village, which made her furious. She immediately ordered her carriage to be prepared so she could go to the village at once. However, her subordinate suggested she reconsider and that it might not be necessary for her to go personally. She could send a messenger instead. In response to these words, a dagger flew straight at the subordinate. That woman was none other than Duchess Alicia Floria, who claimed that her beloved niece was in that village. In this situation, her subordinate assured that he would handle everything. Alicia added that if such an incident happened again, he would be torn apart by her. After a moment, Alicia sat in the carriage, hoping that Arya was safe as winter was approaching, and the 5 girls would struggle to survive the cold season. Back at the large lake that Sui and Lin discovered, Arya glanced around and assumed there was a river nearby, but Rain reminded her that the demon forest was like a dungeon. Rain suggested that the lake might have appeared recently. Dean, sitting by the lake, pondered the strange place. Suddenly, sensing something odd, she called out to Rain and pointed to the lake, saying there were many large fish. At that moment, Kiri walked up to Lin and lightly tapped her head, warning her not to stand too close to the lake as it could be dangerous. Rain then noticed the large fish Lin had mentioned. He pointed out that they weren't demons but regular fish, though Kiri remained skeptical, saying fish couldn't be that big. Sui proposed that maybe the fish grew larger due to magic. Rain agreed and praised Sui for her sharp thinking, explaining that things tend to grow faster in areas where magical energy accumulates, and it seems living creatures are no exception. Rain patted Sui's head and complimented her intelligence. Meanwhile, Lin felt sad, thinking that if they had a fishing rod, they could catch a fish that big. Arya agreed with Lin, saying it had been a long time since the girls had eaten fish, and it could be stored for the winter. Rain liked the idea too, and he remembered Arya had a fishing rod in her backpack. Arya was a bit surprised to learn they had brought a fishing rod. She couldn't understand why they would need one in a demon forest. Rain explained that a fishing rod could be useful in case they found food in the forest. After that, Rain and Arya went looking for the rod. When they found it, Arya felt it was too short and doubted if it was even a fishing rod. Rain explained it was a collapsible rod, and once assembled, it would be ready to use. He prepared the bait, along with a float and sinker. Lin watched, amazed at the amount of bait Rain had brought. After a while, they started fishing. Arya couldn't be more impatient, complaining about sitting for too long, but Rain just asked her to wait a little longer. Finally, he caught a big, beautiful fish. As the fish was brought ashore, Lin asked what they should do next. Rain suggested creating a water tank to keep the fish alive. Using water magic, Rain enclosed the fish in a large water sphere. Arya then decided to join in and started fishing too. A while later, they had several fish in the tank, so Rain proposed making a larger one. Arya watched with frustration since she hadn't caught any fish yet. Then, Rain said it was time to head home as the sun was setting. However, Arya, irritated, refused, saying she wouldn't leave until she caught a fish. Determined not to lose the village leader's honor, she stayed. At that moment, the water began to ripple. Lin joined in to help Arya pull the fish out. Arya began to doubt if it was really a fish. Finally, a huge fish emerged, breaking the water's surface for a few seconds. After their victory, both Arya and Lin stood in stunned silence. Lin quickly realized the situation and began praising Arya, but Arya just asked for help as the fishing rod was about to break. Sui immediately rushed over and used enhancement magic to strengthen the rod, wishing Arya good luck, saying the rod wouldn't break now. At that moment, Rain observed the situation and noticed how strong Sui's enhancement magic was. She had trained hard to reach this level. He decided not to intervene, as the girls were handling things well on their own. Arya continued pulling the rod carefully to reel in the gigantic fish. Finally, the fish surfaced, almost fully revealed. The girls were both amazed and terrified at the sight. Even more surprising was when they realized the fish had a claw. This unexpected event left everyone in shock. Rain figured out that it wasn't a fish, but a giant crab, and he was determined to catch it and bring it home at all costs. However, Arya declared she wouldn't allow them to bring such a giant crab home. After a while, they all headed back home, their friendship now stronger. Arya was still upset that she hadn't caught anything despite her efforts. Rain decided to comfort her, saying she would have better luck next time. Not missing the opportunity, he suggested they go fishing again, but Arya, annoyed, demanded Rain forget about catching that giant crab. Rain wasn't fond of this idea. He was sure Arya was interested in catching the crab too. Arya insisted she didn't care, and was even scared of it, remarking that Rain's behavior was childish. Suddenly, the girls walking ahead stopped abruptly. Arya asked what was going on, but she soon realized when she looked ahead. At the village gate, there was a carriage with a crest on it. Arya recognized it as her aunt's carriage, but didn't understand why her aunt was here. The girls guessed that maybe Alicia missed Arya too much and had come to visit. Just then, Alicia appeared out of nowhere and greeted Arya. This unexpected appearance startled Arya. Without hesitation, Alicia rushed over and hugged Arya tightly, insisting that she hurried over upon hearing that the village was in trouble. Arya, annoyed, asked her aunt to stop hugging her, but Alicia had no intention of letting go. She said it had been too long since they last saw each other, and she wanted to hold Arya tight, despite Arya repeatedly asking to be released. Alicia simply asked her niece not to resist and to look at her. Suddenly, Alicia noticed Rain standing by with a confused expression. She immediately asked what he was doing with her Arya. The next day, a squad of royal knights and court mages wandered through the forest. Their captain was furious, feeling that the king had sent their elite unit to such a desolate place. He believed that a low-level mage would have been enough to handle this situation. Others tried to calm him down, suggesting they quickly deal with the pack of wolves. But the captain thought that was precisely the problem. He said that the prey they were hunting didn't matter, as there would be no gain from it. It turned out the captain had heard that some nobles were regularly engaging in demon hunts. However, he only possessed a basic magic called Windblade. The captain believed that if a kid like Rain could handle such weak magic, their task here would be an easy one. He was convinced they were much stronger than the boy. The whole squad agreed with the captain, praising the knights and mages for their strength. Just then, trouble struck. One knight, terrified after hearing a strange sound, asked, "What was that just now?" The captain laughed loudly, assuming that the prey had come to them, and suggested they take a look at which demon was approaching. After a while, the creature appeared. When they saw the giant bear, both the knights and the royal mages were stunned. They couldn't comprehend where such a massive monster had come from. However, the captain ordered them not to retreat, confident it was just an ordinary demon. The knights quickly regained their composure, ready to show off their strength. Without hesitation, they unleashed the Windblade spell, sending blades flying straight toward the bear. The knights believed the danger had passed, thinking the creature wasn't as powerful as they initially feared. They couldn't even understand why the boy they had heard of was being called a demon-hunting noble. But suddenly the captain shouted loudly when he realized the beast was still standing. This revelation excited him, and he knew the squad would have to put in much more effort. Abruptly, he commanded the squad to stand down. The captain wanted to deal with this demon himself, so he activated a magic technique known as the Great Blade Storm. At that moment, the entire squad realized the captain was serious about this fight. They were certain that with such a powerful attack, the monster would be reduced to nothing but shattered bones. To their shock, however, the bear roared once more, and without hesitation, sat down in front of the captain, who had just flown past its nose. The soldiers couldn't believe it. How could a monster withstand such high-level magic? All the knights rushed forward to save the captain, using wind blades and magical storms. But it was all in vain. The bear remained alive and unscathed. Finally, the mages realized that their magic was utterly ineffective, yet they still couldn't grasp why. Then, 2 more bears emerged from the forest, responding to the roar of the first one. In the end, only the desperate screams of the squad echoed from the depths of the forest. Back at the Holy Kingdom's capital, inside the king's castle, the scene unfolded. The king, furious and frustrated, slammed his hand hard on the table. It turned out that the king's advisors were urging him to send reinforcements to the border, which enraged him. The king was adamant that no additional troops were needed since they had already sent royal mages there. However, the leader of the Royal Mage Guild disagreed. He tried to explain to the king that a month had passed since the mages were sent to the border, yet the demon forces had not diminished. Guy asserted that they had already lost 40% of their army, and without action, the entire force could be wiped out. The king, furious upon hearing this, felt as though he were being mocked. However, his advisors insisted that this was the painful truth. The head of the Royal Mage Guild further reminded the king that, according to him, a demon-hunting noble had single-handedly wiped out an entire demon army using only basic magic, like Windblade. The king asked if they doubted this claim, but they assured him that they did not. Their own mages had also used the same magic, yet it had no effect. The Mage Guild leader argued that they needed to summon the demon-hunting noble before it was too late. At this point, the king's advisors interrupted the conversation. They demanded that the guild leader remain silent, as he had no right to challenge the king's decisions. The advisors were outraged by the mage leader's attitude, accusing him of wanting the proud knights to rely on a boy's magic. But the guild leader insisted that he would never dare to defy the king's decision. The simple fact was that if the army lost control of the border, it could lead to a real disaster. He only hoped the king would make the right choice. The king then stated that the main forces were currently focused on defending the kingdom from neighbouring nations, and if the Royal Mage Guild leader truly desired, he should be the one to seek out the boy and lead him in the fight against the demons. At that moment, everyone in the room exchanged worried glances. Finally, the king was informed that the boy had left the kingdom. Upon hearing this, the king was furious. He remembered that the boy came from a count's lineage, but after his engagement was annulled, he was demoted to a commoner. Even the head of the Royal Mage Guild couldn't believe it. He tried to convince the king that they needed to find the boy immediately. But the king, unable to control his anger any longer, slammed a glass down on the table, ordering the guild leader to be silent. He then threw the glass at him, declaring that it was all the army's fault for being unable to handle such weak demons. The king asserted that if the army couldn't deal with such pitiful demons, there was no reason to continue its existence. He even threatened that the guild leader would be in serious trouble if they failed again. After the conversation, the guild leader left the king's chamber, exhausted. He realized that with a king like this, their kingdom would collapse. His assistant mentioned that if he kept arguing with the king like that, he might get exiled. Hearing this, the guild leader responded that perhaps it would be better to leave the kingdom if it came to that. His assistant asked why he was trying so hard, reminding him of his position as head of the Royal Mage Guild. But this time he didn't answer. The girl then asked if he wanted to move to another country. The guild leader laughed loudly and replied that he wasn't ready to give up just yet. Not long after arriving, Alicia sat in the villa Rain had built, her face filled with displeasure. Rain sat across from her, feeling the tension and heavy pressure. At this point, Alicia's personal butler decided to intervene. He asked her to calm down. Alicia obeyed, easing the tension before changing the subject. She said she was relieved to know that Arya and her friends were safe. Alicia also apologized for not being able to come sooner. She explained that she had appointed someone in the village to contact her if there was any danger, but after hearing nothing for so long, she began to worry. Thanks to Kess's investigation, Alicia had learned the whole situation and arrived just in time before things got worse. That was when Alicia finally asked Arya about what had happened in the village. As Arya recounted the events, Alicia flew into a rage. She ordered Kess to track down all the cowards who had fled the village. Alicia declared that she would personally deal with each of them, and they would beg for death. Kess, meanwhile, assured her that the search had already begun, and it was only a matter of time. While Alicia considered punishments such as forcing them to walk on hot coals or locking them in iron cages, Rain glanced at Arya and wondered if Alicia was truly serious. In just a moment, Alicia flashed a satisfied smile, having resolved one issue and quickly moved on to the next. She turned to Rain, who was visibly nervous. He realized that if he said anything wrong, there would be no escape from disaster. The first thing Alicia asked was his name. Rain introduced himself, saying it was an honor to meet her. But Alicia told him to skip the formalities, explaining that Rain was currently the most suspicious person in the village, so she needed to investigate him thoroughly. She added that she couldn't allow any suspicious individuals to stay in the village. Rain grew even more anxious, understanding that if Alicia wasn't satisfied, there would be serious consequences. He then began to tell his story, explaining that he was a monster hunter from his homeland. Miria and Arya immediately covered Rain's mouth, saying that he had only recently started living with them. The girls then dragged Rain out the door. Once in the hallway, Arya asked Rain if he really planned to tell the truth. But before he could respond, Arya reminded him that in this country, the understanding of magic was very limited. Miria added that Rain had come from another country to teach them magic, and if anyone found out, it could cause major problems for him. Miria realized that hiding the truth would be difficult, while Arya also knew that lying to her aunt wasn't ideal, but she was willing to do it to protect Rain. The girls then decided to create a perfect backstory for Rain. Miria promised that they would all keep the secret and began coaching Rain on his new story. Rain barely had time to memorize all the details. After a while, Alicia sat down to listen to Rain once again. Rain, now sweating and trembling, said that he used to be an adventurer and made a living from it. One day, while traveling, he stumbled upon this village and, unable to walk away, decided to stay and help. Alicia looked skeptical of his story. Rain realized this, knowing no one would believe that he just happened to appear in the village. At that moment, Arya stepped in to save the situation. She approached Alicia and asked, calling her aunt, if she believed her. Alicia replied that she would believe Arya if she called her dear aunt one more time. Rain realized he had just been rescued. Then, Alicia asked another question. Did you build this house and these walls? Rain replied that he had created them using his magic. Based on Rain's words, Alicia understood that such magic existed. Arya intervened again, telling Alicia that they were truly grateful Rain had stayed in the village, and as for registration, they had decided to wait until spring. Alicia listened to Arya and chose not to include this in her report. At that moment, Kes noticed the conversation winding down and asked Alicia for permission to begin unloading the supplies. Alicia agreed, but emphasized that this was not a gift, but rather a transaction. She explained that Arya, as the village leader, should understand economic principles. Alicia asked Arya what she could offer in exchange for the supplies. Melia sighed in relief, thinking they had dodged a bullet, but Arya admitted they had nothing left. Melia added that after the recent monster attack, they had lost nearly everything. The girls whispered among themselves, trying to figure out what they could offer Alicia in exchange for the supplies. Rain suggested they trade the magic stones they had collected from the monsters, and Arya supported the idea. Alicia, on the other hand, added that they could also offer some vegetables. Kes responded that vegetables were a valuable resource, especially with winter approaching and the next harvest far off. After a while, the table was filled with the resources Rain's group was willing to trade in exchange for the supplies from Alicia. Alicia even apologized to Arya, explaining that this was all they could offer at the moment. She hadn't seen such high-quality magic stones in a long time, so she asked if the group had mined them themselves. But just then, Alicia discovered something even more valuable: the potions Rain had crafted. After some thought, Alicia decided she wanted to buy out the group's entire supply. Miria, surprised by this decision, asked if Alicia was certain. Alicia confirmed with certainty, explaining that the group's supplies were genuinely of excellent quality. Rain helped Kes pack everything and load it onto the carriage, while the girls continued talking with Alicia. They couldn't believe that such modest resources were enough to exchange for all of Alicia's assistance. But Alicia emphasized that if Arya showed her affection for her dear aunt, that would be enough. Arya, confused and outraged, demanded to know what Alicia was talking about. She turned to Miria for support, but Miria responded by making a heart gesture, signaling her betrayal. Arya realized she had no other choice, so she turned to her aunt and said she'd be happy to have her buy all their supplies. This request made Alicia overwhelmingly pleased, and the house erupted in joyful cheers. Miria then began cheering Arya on, while Arya declared she would never forgive Miria for this. At that moment, Alicia approached Rain, and he stepped forward to listen. Alicia admitted that his story had made her suspicious, but she also said that if Rain was willing to help the village, she would be grateful for him to stay. Alicia added that she had one small request for Rain. "You're not doing anything dirty around here, are you?" she asked, a question that terrified Rain. At that moment, Arya jumped into the conversation, asking her aunt to stop saying such ridiculous things. She tried to explain to Alicia that Rain was a good person. Alicia realized that the girls and Rain had become close friends, so she decided not to inquire any further about Rain's past or present. In the end, everyone came to understand one thing. Alicia had figured everything out. Alicia said she would leave the village's welfare in Rainer's hands, something Arya was deeply grateful for. But suddenly, Alicia declared that the conversation on behalf of Count Floria was over. This statement left all three frozen in shock. With a look of disdain, Alicia announced that from now on she would speak as Arya's aunt. She stated that she didn't believe Rain had no interest in her niece. She believed that all men were predators, just waiting for a chance to pounce on a beautiful woman. And, with Rain and Arya living under the same roof, Alicia's suspicions grew even stronger. She pointed out that before Rain built the house, they were even sleeping together. Alicia confessed she had never slept with Arya herself and admitted she was truly jealous of Rain. She then declared she wouldn't hand Arya over to Rain so easily and challenged him to fight for her. In the end, Alicia loudly challenged Rain to a duel. Shortly after, Alicia and Rain went outside to prepare for the battle. Alicia declared that she wouldn't kill Rain, despite this being a duel, but set the condition that if she won, she would take Arya away. The other girls stood nearby, watching the scene unfold, not knowing what had happened. Meanwhile, Rain responded that he couldn't decide something like that with Arya, as they didn't have that kind of relationship. These words only made Alicia angrier, feeling like Rain was implying her niece wasn't worthy. But Rain cried out in fear, saying that wasn't the case at all. In that case, Alicia demanded Rain give 500 reasons why Arya was adorable. Rain, confused, didn't understand what Alicia wanted from him. Alicia then accused him of giving up. She declared that even she couldn't write 3,000 words on the subject. Afterward, Alicia called Arya over, asking her to come closer. Arya approached, asking what her aunt wanted. Alicia apologized and asked to borrow her sword. Arya didn't understand why Alicia asked for her sword, especially since her aunt's butler was still present. Alicia smiled and confessed that she hadn't expected this situation to arise, so she wasn't prepared. Moreover, her own sword wasn't something she wanted to use here. At that moment, Rain noticed, though he had long suspected it, that the Countess's sword emitted an immense amount of magic power. Finally, Alicia was handed the sword. She swung it and announced that the rules were simple. The loser would be the one to surrender or become unable to continue the fight. Alicia stated that body enhancement magic could be used. Rain understood everything and readied himself for the duel. Just then, Arya and Miria called out to him. Rain approached, and the girls apologized for Alicia dragging him into her games. Arya explained that when it came to her, Alicia always went overboard. Rain reassured Arya, telling her not to worry, saying he was curious to see how strong the Countess really was. Besides, Rain knew he just needed to win and believed he wouldn't lose. While Alicia admired Arya's sword, the girls tried to relay every important detail to Rain. They knew Rain was strong, but if Alicia used her full power, she could destroy the entire village in the blink of an eye. Thus, Arya asked him to be extremely careful, as they didn't want the whole village to be destroyed. It was then that Rain realized they were in trouble. He confessed that he didn't know how to hold back his strength. Once, while training, he had nearly sent his parents to the afterlife. Hearing this, Arya realized the situation was dire, so she called over Kess, saying she had something to discuss with him. At that moment, Alicia was eager to begin. She declared that Rain couldn't escape because Arya belonged to her. Just then, Kess called out to Alicia. She turned around, annoyed, and asked what he wanted, telling him she wasn't in the mood to be interrupted. Kess simply suggested that he take her place in the duel. Alicia found the suggestion intriguing and asked why Kess wanted to do so. Kess explained that Alicia knew very well that Rain couldn't defeat her and suggested he take her place to ensure Rain's safety. He mentioned that Alicia could simply observe from the sidelines if she wanted to see Rain's capabilities. In the end, Kess convinced Alicia, and he thanked her for allowing it. He also admitted that he was a bit worried. Since Rain had been living with Arya and her friends for so long, what would Arya think of Alicia if she bullied Rain? Alicia even imagined Arya telling her that she hated her after everything that had happened. Kess asked once more if Alicia really wanted to fight Rain, and she finally admitted she couldn't bear the thought of it. Arya realized that Kess had succeeded in convincing Alicia to abandon the duel, so she thanked him. The sword was now in Kess's hands. Arya supported Rain as much as she could, saying that trying his best wouldn't be hard. But Rain, holding a small knife, said he wasn't used to wielding weapons, so this wouldn't be easy for him. Finally, Alicia announced the start of the duel. In the blink of an eye, Kess disappeared, catching Rain off guard. But just a moment later, Kess appeared behind Rain, swinging his sword and nearly hitting him. Rain barely dodged in time, realizing how fast Kess was. Kess was surprised too. He had intended to finish the match with a single strike and hadn't expected Rain to dodge, but he wasn't about to give up that easily. Kess swung his sword again, but Rain dodged once more. For the next few minutes, Kess continued his attacks, but Rain kept evading them. Eventually, Rain realized that based on Kess's speed, he specialized in body enhancement magic to increase his agility. Rain knew that keeping up with Kess would be a major challenge. Finally, Rain decided to go on the offensive. The first thing he did was cast a spell called Windblade. Kess was astonished to see Rain holding 8 spells at once. He knew magic wasn't forbidden in this duel, and immediately recognized that Rain was incredibly skilled. Kess understood that he would have to put in more effort to face Rain. Kess decided to test Rain's abilities and launched another attack. He threw a knife at Rain's feet and shouted, "Explode!" The explosion went off, and at first, Rain couldn't see anything through the smoke. Meanwhile, Lin and Sui just yawned and wiped their eyes as if nothing was happening. Rain realized Kess had used magic on the thrown object and guessed that Kess intended to attack him from within the smoke. But Kess revealed himself, and Rain immediately struck with his Windblade spell. Rain then decided to create pillars using earth magic. He realized that by creating obstacles, he could use magic to thicken the air and suffocate his opponent. If Rain were fighting a demon, that's exactly what he would do. But he didn't want to use such magic against a human. Kess was confused by how quickly Rain had created so many pillars. He realized that keeping his distance was the right move. Just by observing Rain's magic, Kess could tell Rain was highly experienced. Kess had no idea that someone like this was living in their country. He even acknowledged that Rain was stronger than him. But he still believed that no matter how great the difference in power, there was always a chance to win. Kess once again decided to vanish from Rain's sight. Rain realized that if he got too serious, Kess could die, so he had to be more cautious and avoid breaking his own weapon. However, Rain also understood that there was no other choice, and he silently apologized to Arya. At that moment, Kess appeared from above. He was certain that Rain had completely forgotten about an aerial attack and thought he had secured his victory. But just as Kess was about to strike, Rain blocked his sword with his knife. Kess was stunned at that moment, his sword vibrating, and in an instant, a crack appeared on it. The sword couldn't withstand the force and shattered. Kess was horrified and couldn't comprehend what had happened. Rain noticed that Arya's sword had broken and felt a little sad. After a moment, Alicia scolded Kess for losing the match, pressing his head to the ground and asking if he had anything to say for himself. Kess simply apologized and admitted that he had underestimated his opponent. Alicia turned to Rain and acknowledged that she was convinced Rain was indeed an exceptional person. Therefore, she declared his victory. However, she added that this didn't mean he had permission to bother Arya. Rain laughed, completely unaware of what she meant. He didn't even have that idea in his mind. In the end, Alicia grabbed Kess by the leg and dragged him toward the carriage, saying she would return, and until then, the village's safety depended on Rain. As Kess and the Countess made their way home, Kess remarked that Rain's power was as strong as the fiercest storm, but Alicia remained silent. Kess then asked if she was in a good mood, and if something had happened. Alicia responded that she was just happy to have seen Arya. Besides, she was interested in something else. She handed Kess a vial and asked him to take a look. Kess didn't know what it was, so he asked Alicia. Alicia explained that it was a liquid from medicinal herbs extracted using high-level magic. Thanks to it, the group could grow such excellent vegetables. However, a single vial like this could buy a house in the royal capital. Alicia said that when she saw the vial among the supplies, she couldn't believe her eyes. Moreover, when she asked the girls where they got it, they claimed they obtained it themselves. Alicia was certain that these valuable items had been brought by Rain. Kess, on the other hand, mentioned that he had realized Rain was an extraordinary person. As Alicia already knew, repairing equipment required special materials infused with magical energy, and whichever nation had more of these materials would win the war. Alicia then rubbed her forehead and smiled, saying she should have figured that out earlier. She now understood that Rain was far too powerful for their land, so she was certain he came from a neighboring country. Though Alicia didn't know why he chose to come to them, she felt reassured that as long as he stayed in the village, their safety would be guaranteed. Alicia knew Kes wasn't fond of rain, but she argued that letting such a powerful mage leave would be foolish. On this point, Kes agreed. Kes then suggested completing the registration for new residents as soon as possible, but Alicia told him not to rush, as this village was difficult to find. She also mentioned that if this happened, Kes must ensure the information didn't leak out. Alicia admired the thought of having such potions produced on her territory, believing they could become her strongest trump card. And if that truly came to pass, she was determined to embarrass that arrogant second prince once and for all.